Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
And I'm your co-host, Kenna.
All right, Kenna, today I wanted to start the episode by asking you, what's your credit score?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy. Now it is like 700.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, because, one is like 702 and the other one is 696. So that might not be 700, but I'm just going to say it's 700 because I can't do math in my head because in school they said that we'd always have a calculator.
Well, I think that's probably good. 700 is a good estimate in between the two. Is it just from Credit Karma?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, this is like vaguely related, but I like on TikTok never check my kind of private messages, and Credit Karma DM'd me.
What?
Yes, and I told them to email me, so I might have that sweet, sweet Credit Karma sponsorship because I talk about them all the time.
Yeah, okay. Well, you're the one who told me about them because my credit score was not great. Like before we worked together, you were helping me get together my finances, and I think it was in the 500s. I don't think it was even in the 600s, but when I was trying to get my credit score up earlier the year, I was like 610. Like I was like barely over the amount to like qualify for like a mortgage. And so I did some of the things where I got a credit card and I put money on it and I paid it off immediately and it shot my credit score up really fast.
That's really good. Yeah, I really like Credit Karma, so hopefully they'll pay me to like them in the future. I already like them. What could go wrong?
But it is true. Like that's the reason, like that really helped me get my credit score because I was able to, because before I was just like, I don't know who I owe money to. And it tells you exactly how much you owe money to, but we shouldn't talk about them anymore
until they pay
us.
Right. Okay. We're holding out on the other nice things we have to say about that corporation until they give us money.
But this is, I am like really shocked about my credit score right now. It's like I paid off a lot of debt this year.
Yeah. I think that's like a really, really good credit score for you.
Thank you. Cool. I worked really, really hard. I paid off a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot. I remember you put a lot of work into it.
I paid off my back surgery.
Oh my God, that's so wild.
Yeah.
So.
But maybe it'll go up now because I do get some of my student loans relieved under the new thing.
I can get mine too. I have to apply though, and I don't think they've released where you apply yet.
No, I don't think yet. But guess what? One of mine doesn't fucking count because I went to a private school.
Oh my God. I went to a private school. Mine still qualify.
They told me mine did not qualify.
Really?
Yes. Because I was like, I've been paying all through COVID. I've heard of people like calling and being like, hey, like I want to get reimbursed and they were like, no, we're a private school. That doesn't count. Wow.
Okay. I need to look into this a lot more. I feel like I was just like waiting for the application website with the details to come out.
Yeah, it hasn't yet. I signed up for a thing to give you the email. That is one. Okay. I am not. Okay. Maybe this is an ADHD thing where it's like bad with homework, great on tests.
Yes.
Like where it's like, I hate day-to-day bureaucracy. Like, I have to remember to pay this bill, blah, blah, blah. But if it comes to something like getting like COVID relief, getting like paying my taxes, like something that's like a big urgent thing, like I'll do it. I'll do it the first day. Like I'll get it all together. But if it's just like a normal, like, just pay like Quest Diagnostics, I'm like, no.
That's really interesting. I feel like I'm really good at the big stuff, but I have to wait until the last minute. Like when I was in high school, I would only do my homework the day before it was due. And if it was a project where it's like, no, you need more than one day to do this, I'm just like, no, whatever happens in a day is what gets turned in.
Okay, I've also learned from TikTok that is an ADHD thing too. And sometimes I'm like, wow, we don't have personalities. We just have ADHD.
We just have ADHD. Well, I checked my credit score today. And my TransUnion score was 805.
Jeez.
Okay, wait, but then my Equifax score was 813.
What the fuck? How high do these credit scores go?
Well, wait. My FICO score was 821. And my Experian, like, are you ready? This one's like really good. My Experian was 844.
Whoa. Okay. Now I worked really hard to get that. average 700 and now?
No, I think it's great that you did that. So the maximum credit score you can have is 850 total possible.
Wow.
And I didn't even know getting an 844 was possible. That was like so impressive to me. So for a while, when I was learning about financial literacy, I would listen to Dave Ramsey. Kenna knows this.
I was there.
Yes. And Dave Ramsey is like the opposite of everything I stand for. Like, I'm fully convinced he would shoot a woman for getting pregnant outside of marriage, and that just feels like his vibe to me.
Which he did pull a gun on a pregnant lady.
I think he fired a pregnant lady, and then he just happened to have guns in his office.
We'll have to look this up.
Whatever the case, it's not like he's an awesome dude. But when it came to money management, he had this like real self-professed hillbilly hatred of banks that I did appreciate that. Like, this guy, say what you will about him, he's not a good person, but he hates a bank. So I was able to find common ground with him just on that alone that kept me listening. And I always remember that he called a credit score an I love debt score because it doesn't reflect how financially well off you are. It just reflects how much of a trustworthy borrower you are. So a bank can make lots of money off of you. And that really stuck with me. Like, this wild ass right wing evangelical Christian dude, he was right about this thing. The credit score is totally an I love debt score. And I say that as someone who has struggled with debt a lot in my life.
Same.
So, Kenna, what's your relationship with debt been throughout your life?
Oh gosh. I mean, I didn't have any until college, and that was with college loans. I didn't even have like a credit card until after college. Although I think my mom took out one in my name, which I only learned later after looking at my credit score. But it's fine. She didn't do anything weird with it.
I had a situation like that too. I looked at my credit score and I was like, how did a credit card get taken out in my name when I was a child in the 80s? How did this happen? And then I was like, oh, mom. Oh, or dad, I guess. Or dad. Okay.
Like,
Someone.
sometimes, it's fine. Nothing bad happened. It was fine. So, but after college, I went to a really expensive college, the University of Denver. And it is very expensive. I think it's something like $30K a year or something. I don't know how much college is now, but it's like,
I think that's how much mine was supposed to be too, but I got a bunch of like grants and scholarships and got out for $30K total.
I got grants and scholarships.
Yeah.
My parents were nice enough to like help me too, and like, but I still have like, I think I still owe 15K. No, wait, 11K. I don't know. I owe like around 10 grand to them still. But so then after I graduated, I had student loan debt, but then I also started taking out credit cards, which I at first only used where it's like here and there, but I wasn't really super responsible with them. And I think I ended up buying a computer with a credit card that later went, badly. And I'm like, that computer cost me $5,000 instead of $1,300 because of all the interest and fees. And like, I had like, basically I paid off all my credit card debt that I had been handling for years this year. I realized though, if I would have waited a couple more years, it just would have fallen off. I will say, my ex, who I hate, he got his credit score up to 750 from literally not having like 300.
Wow.
And you know what he did?
Just waited it out.
He waited 7 years. He didn't take out any debt. He got a burner phone and just waited for it to all go away. And then one day his credit score was like 700.
Yeah, I really respect that life. I really respect.
He sucked. Like Dave Ramsey, he sucked.
But sometimes people you don't like can do one right thing.
Yeah, and I was like, he's just like, he like had all these things where he would like, had his entire life was waiting for that debt to fall off.
Yeah, I feel like if you're going to be in a position where you don't need to take out more loans or need more credit for the next 7 years, that's a super viable option. And it can also like give you peace of mind,
Yeah.
But I've heard things like if you answer the phone once to talk to them, the 7-year cycle starts over, which makes sense why your ex had a burner phone because you can't talk to them once about it.
No, he said that's what he said. He's like, I learned all this stuff on the internet. He's like, I literally had a burner phone. Like, I never answered the phone.
Right.
Like, only people who had my number, like only if I saw them, I never answered a phone number that I didn't already know the phone number of. And I was
Yeah.
like, honestly, that is dedication.
Yeah, it takes dedication for sure, but also, like, I don't know, I think that's pretty smart. Like, I feel like if that's the position you're in, like, just wait it out, man. Wait it
Yeah.
out.
And, I thought about that for a while, but then I was just like, I need credit score, like, cause like, eventually, like, I wanna be, own my place just for, I think I got freaked I'm, like, just starting to be at the age where I'm freaking out about retirement.
Yes,
And I'm just like,
relatable.
which seems funny to be, like, only in your 30s and being like, but it's like,
It's
I wish I woulda
scary.
started saving when I was first started working.
Yeah, I wish I would have started saving when I was 18 for sure. It's not something you really think about, and I think like when you get into your late 30s, you start to get really really overworking. Not that you ever like love working, but like I think in your 30s like you get to a point where I'm like, "Oh, I've been working for 20 years. I think that's
We've both
enough."
been working for over 20 years at this point.
Yes, and you're just like, I can't do this for the rest of my life, and the only path is to try to secure something for your retirement, so in your old age, you don't have to put your body through torture and torment, and, obviously, it's all the stuff that should be provided for free by our
Yeah,
government.
and
We
it's
should have
like
elderly care and a
that's
support
the thing, it's
system.
just like that pisses me off, and I think I had the punk rock attitude where it's just like, "I shouldn't have to fucking do this." Like, this is like in a society, we should provide for each other. We have all the, so I'm like, "I don't wanna do it," and now I'm less like it's I say it all the time, but it's like my mom says, "We live in capitalism."
You
Like,
have to survive it.
you have to have a survival strategy, and, like, it fucking sucks, and it's not fair.
Right,
And sometimes
exactly.
I just try to make that survival strategy, like, as least painful and as fun as you can make something. Like, do you ever trick yourself into liking to do something that you hate?
Yeah, saving and getting my money together. I had to trick myself.
I would say me doing the dishes.
Oh,
How I
yeah.
trick myself now is I put on because I hate doing dishes. I hate it. But what I do is I build myself up, or I'm like, oh, you just do it between two things you really like, and then I put on my earphones and I listen to my favorite podcast, or I got an iPad and I literally watch an anime while I do dishes, and that tricks me into doing it.
Yeah, that's like the capitalism survival for sure. I feel like when you're young, you're like, fuck all this. And you don't though want to enter your 40s or whatever, having been such a martyr to your beliefs that you shoot yourself in the foot.
That's the thing, and it's like, I have definitely found that before because it's just like, I've been like, "Ugh," like, but it's like, I wanna have fun, I wanna, like, be free and live my life and do stuff, but the thing is, it's like, I couldn't do that fun stuff because I wasn't managing my money right, but, like, some of that was out of my control, and I think a
Right.
lot of that's money stuff is, like, out of your control, but if you have a little bit of control, like, you'll thank yourself later.
That's
I
totally what
always,
it
like,
is.
talk about, like, future Kenna,
Yes.
where I'm just like, I'll be at the store, I'm like, "I'm gonna get myself a drink for later," and then later, I'm just like, "Thank you, past Kenna. I really needed this drink right now, and I didn't wanna have to go to the store."
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's like you have to pick and choose your battles and you have to ultimately survive. And sometimes surviving means playing the game a little bit. I feel like when it comes to like debt and money management, my basic relationship with debt growing up was like really, really bad and wrong. So my outlook was, look, you're going to be too broke to ever have a good life without debt. A credit card's going to save your ass all the time, especially in emergencies. So you're going to need to keep a good credit score so you can get better loans and better interest rates. And that part was good. But the part that was really like toxic money of me, which is like broke kid thinking, I now realize, is that the way I viewed debt was that it was a special club where as long as you paid the monthly membership fees, which is your minimum monthly payment on your debt, you could always get whatever you wanted in life. And I remember telling like family members this, like, this is how I view debt. And everyone was like, yes, that is correct. And nobody was like, that is a really fucked up, toxic way of thinking. And you will never build comfort or wealth or be able to save for retirement or have an okay life with that mentality. So, like, even still, even thinking this way, I still considered myself pretty responsible with credit. Like, I only used my credit card in emergencies, like medical situations. Like, there was this one time I sliced my cornea open on a hanger, and then I had to wear an eye patch for weeks. And then I couldn't go to work because I was working as an image retoucher, and my depth perception was all off. And so then I just had to live off a credit card for 2 weeks till my eye healed. wild, or like car situations, like every car I've ever had, and until I started buying Kias, you
Get
know,
sponsored by Kia now.
Kia, give me that Kia money too. I want Credit Karma money. I want Kia money. And eventually I want Coffee Coke money. I'm already
Oh,
liking these things.
the
But yeah,
trifecta.
the trifecta. But before the Kia, I had horrible Volvo, horrible Saturn that just were always breaking in like awful ways. I would have to put these emergency repairs on my credit card. And then also like bad things that happened with my dog. Like when something would come up with my 15-year-old now dachshund Mo dog, I'd put the emergencies on my credit card. And still, even just with those emergencies, my credit card debt ballooned out of control to $17,000 on a credit card that had like a 20% interest rate. And I, at the time, was living on an annual income of $19,000 some years. So when I combined my credit card debt with my other debt, which was like car loans, student loans, personal loans I'd taken out to refinance credit card debt that had ballooned out of control in the past before that, even, I had a total of $65,000 of debt in my name. And I remember this number because I felt like no matter what I changed or did, I always somehow still had $65,000 in debt. Like the number never went down, it would just bounce around to different things. And after a few years and finally getting a stable income to live off of, I was finally able to tackle the debt and pay it down. And now, similar to you, Kenna, I just have around $8,000 in outstanding student loans, which, yeah, I do think should be eligible for debt forgiveness. Fingers crossed. So I have to look into that. But it was like this stressful, fucked up journey getting to this point. And the whole time, while I was so broke and crying every day about money, I always had just a stellar credit score, which is so weird, right? Broke as fuck and tons of debt. Credit score, though, amazing, untouchable, which really just goes to show you how much a credit score is not an indicator of financial health. Remembering all this, though, just made me think about like how gnarly and bizarre the US credit system is. And then today I was going through our Patreon messages and I found a message from one of our listeners, Harmony Marie, who suggested that we do an episode on the US credit system. And I was thinking about like all of this and just how complicated my personal relationship with money and debt has been in my life. And I thought, like, yes, we have to do this episode today. So without further ado, today's episode topic is indeed the US credit system.
Yeah, brought to you by company we shall not name.
Yes, yes. Or any other company that wants to
That
give us
wants
money.
to insert name here.
As long as I kind of like you and you're not the absolute worst. And the bar's on the floor. The bar is on the floor for what the worst is in this system. So I feel like most people who listen know this, but like Kenna never knows our topic before we record. I just kind of surprise her with it, mostly because I want to hear her thoughts just like organically without any influence. And also, I think that Kenna provides a good audience stand-in case I explain something poorly or gloss over something interesting. She always kind of has the opportunity to stop and go, wait, what? If I don't make sense, or point things out that I totally missed. So I always appreciate, Kenna, you letting me put you on the spot when I ask you questions at the top of the episode. Because I feel like it's good also to get an idea of how much just the average person knows about things we talk about on our podcast, like a layman's understanding. But Kenna, you're like a really smart person and you usually know a lot more than I do before researching things. So rather than just being a regular layman, you're like a smarty lay woman.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. So Kenna, without any preparation at all here, can you explain to me like what the US credit score means? Like what is a credit score here in the United States? What's your understanding of how the US credit system works as an adult who has had to contend with it your entire life?
Okay, I am actually a little bit confused by it, but all I know is that you need it in order to get stuff that you can't pay for outright. For example, like, an apartment. A lot of times you have to have a credit score over at least 500. A lot of places in LA are 600, which is wild to me. Like, because to me, you're always going to pay your rent on time because you're going to get evicted. And if you get evicted, like that'll fuck up your life.
Right.
So, okay. So I'm like, okay, you need a credit score to be like, to get an apartment. You need a credit score to get a credit card. You need a credit score sometime, or to get a car loan. Sometimes even to get like a phone, you need like a decent credit score or a certain amount. So, I'm trying to think of all the times I've gotten my credit checked. It's usually, yeah, apartment, car. Well, I have actually never had a car loan.
Oh, that's amazing. That's really good.
Because my dad always worked as a car part supplier, so he always knew someone who was getting rid of a cheap car.
That's amazing. That's a
Yeah,
good asset.
and my cousin works for Ford, so my parents would always get good deals, so it's like, I always just got the hand-me-down that was kind of on its, like, maybe last legs, but very grateful, the very, very, very grateful for that, like, that's the generational wealth, it's
Yeah,
like
for
a
sure.
geez, so it's like, I haven't ever had to have a car loan, but I've had people check it for, apartments before, and I didn't get it one time because my credit score wasn't high enough.
Right. So, like, a credit score would just be a number between 300 and 850 that's given to you by a number of different American financial institutions, which would be like banks, credit reporting bureaus, etc. And this means that we all have more than one credit score, which we touched on earlier when Kenna said two of hers, and I told you all of mine when I read my four out loud. And like we kind of mentioned, they're all usually a little different based on who is doing the reporting, but they tend to fall within a really similar range to one another. And these scores take into account things like your bill paying history, but just for things that report to credit bureaus. So usually it's just debt related accounts like car loans, student loans, credit cards, not debit cards. Uh, and then also probably not things like your electric bill or internet bill or rent, unless, of course, you stop paying them and then you get sent to collections, in which case the outstanding amount you owe becomes debt. Or within a few exceptions. There's this new program Experian launched to try to include those things called like Experian Boost, which we'll talk about later. But for the most part, your credit score is only going to take into account debt that you pay on. It also takes into account your current unpaid debt, like total amount you have outstanding. It takes into account the number and type of loan accounts you have, how long you've had your loan accounts open, how much of your available credit you're using, new applications for credit, and whether you've had debt sent to collections or have had a foreclosure or a bankruptcy and how long ago. So, when a credit bureau or bank generates your credit score, it's taking into account all of those things in different ways. And then in the end, it spits out a number, which is your score. So, if your score fell between 300 and 499, that would be considered like a really bad score. Roughly 5% of Americans fall in that range. If your credit score comes out 500 to 600, that's considered still kind of bad. 21% of Americans fall in that range. So, a lot of people end up in that kind of pool. If your credit score comes out 601 to 660, that would be considered okay. 13% of Americans fall into that range. Anything between 661 and 780 is considered good. That would be 38% of Americans. And anything between 781 and 850 is considered excellent. And usually all these records, they just go back 7 years ish, which is why we were talking about the horrible ex-boyfriend who managed to game the system by just waiting out his debt 7 years. That's usually why, because not all debt, I don't think student loans fall off your credit report ever, but some consumer debt will just fall off of your credit report after 7 years of not making any contact with anybody about it or making any payments. Negative credit assessments usually, yes, remain on your report for 7 years. Bankruptcy proceedings remain on for 10 years. And any good credit behavior, like you pay your bills on time, that would stay on your record for life. So, for each loan you take out, the report records your payment history, how many times you paid on time, when you were late, and whether you were 30, 60, or more than 90 days behind with your payment. And then your credit score is used to basically influence all sorts of things you do in the modern dystopia hellscape that is American capitalism. So, like Kenna was saying, if you need to get a loan for a car, or if you want to buy a house, or yeah, even if you just need to rent an apartment, here in the US, they're all pretty much going to consult that credit score first and foremost. And your credit score will also determine how good or bad the terms of loans you get are. So, all of us, when we need to borrow money for something, to buy a car or pay school tuition, whatever, we will be put into these kind of borrower risk profile slots. And then banks will decide one, if they will lend to us at all, and two, if they will, what kind of interest rate they will charge us based on the borrower risk profile that we fall into. And the borrower risk profiles are all based around this idea of being prime. That's like the big word, which also correlates to government set interest rates controlled by the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve decides what interest rates are for the whole country's banking systems, and they can change every month. And this is in an effort to control inflation in the country. Then the prime interest rate banks charge you, that's usually 3% higher than whatever the Federal Reserve kind of sets. So that means that all borrower risk profiles are centered around this idea of a prime borrower, following into that prime interest rate. And if you're below that, you're called subprime. And if you're above that, you're called super prime, which is kind of a fun name. And your interest rates are going to vary according to that. So all of this sounds like really complicated and confusing, right? But most borrower risk profiles go like this. If your credit score is below 580, they call you deep subprime, which is kind of sexy. It kind of sounds like techno.
It sounds like a movie.
Yeah, for sure. It's either like a weird sci-fi movie or like your favorite DJ. Then if your credit score is between 580 to 619, you would just be considered subprime. Then, if your credit score is 620 to 659, you'd be called near prime, which I feel like they could have come up with a better name for that one. That one doesn't flow as well. Then, once you hit 660 all the way up to 719, you are considered prime. You're a prime borrower. You're eligible for that prime interest rate. Then, if your credit score is over 720, you're called super prime, and you can get like the bomb interest rates. And the general idea is this. If your credit score is bad, the lender will view you as a riskier person to loan money to. They think, hey, there's a good chance you might not pay us back. So they're going to try to recoup as much upfront as possible, meaning they'll charge you a higher interest rate in case you just stop paying altogether. They make a calculated risk when lending. They always know there's a chance you won't pay them back. So by charging higher interest rates to people who have lower credit scores, they're trying to mitigate that risk and just get some money in, which is also why I think you should never feel bad about not paying back a bank. Because one, fuck a bank. Two, they knew when they loaned you that money, there was going to be a chance you never paid it back. And three, odds are, if you were that much of a credit risk factor, they already recouped a bunch of money from you by charging those high interest rates up front. So that's just my personal rant. But yeah. People with better credit scores, they're going to be considered less of a risk on the flip side. So they end up getting these lower interest rates because the banks feel they can count on you to keep making payments until the entire amount is paid off, meaning that they will make their full investment back because they'll be getting more months of interest. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is funny to me though, because to me, it has nothing to do with morality or like how good of a person you are. Like, how like you feel inclined to pay these back. Like just because you don't pay back a bank doesn't mean you're a bad person, and because you do pay a bank, you're a good person, which I think is really funny.
Yeah.
That people take credit scores to be this like thing of like they will pay it. It's like to me, I'm like has nothing to do with how good you are.
Yeah, lots of people do associate them with like honesty and trustworthiness. There's like a moralization that goes along with it, which is weird. Okay, so if you want to think though about what this really means in like a day-to-day life when it comes to your, credit score and trying to buy things and interest rates, I have an exercise. Okay, so Kenna, let's say you and I both want to go buy a new car and we're going to get the same car. And for the sake of this exercise, let's say your credit score is 800 and mine is 600. And we're going to both be purchasing the same vehicle at the same time. And since it's my exercise, I chose my dream car. So my dream car right now is the Kia Sportage plug-in hybrid.
Okay.
Okay, again, Kia is not paying me yet. Manifesting that one. I really want this car. I want this car. It has 84 miles per gallon combined fuel economy. It gets 34 miles of all-electric driving range. It has a total range of 430 miles. It's all-wheel drive. It has a 100,000-mile warranty. And I'm just saying Kia is ranked number 1 in vehicle dependability according to J.D. Power.
Okay.
So,
I see what you're doing here.
I'm really trying to get us that Kia money. Or maybe just a Kia for me. I just want a new Kia. I just love them. So whatever. I'm a Kia super fan. This car is my dream. All right. Wow. So that's the car we're going to shop for in my scenario.
I was like, dang, I wanted a VW bus, and that doesn't give very good gas mileage. Although they're coming out with a new one that's all electric.
Yeah. So that's
sick.
That can be your dream car.
Yeah. I'm getting that.
Okay, great. Well, I only looked up the Kia Sportage plug-in hybrid, so that's
fine.
That's
fine.
the number we're using.
Fine.
So this car's starting price here in Los Angeles, because they do have different prices depending on where you buy them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The car here, it starts at $38,490, which is a lot of money. But let's say we add some sort of extra fancy shit to it, and it ends up being around $40,000 total by the time we're done. Like there's like a cute trim package or something.
I'm getting a sunroof.
Okay, yeah. The sunroof adds an extra grand and some change. We're up to $40K. So it's definitely an expensive car. It's definitely not a car I can afford. But, we're dreaming in the exercise, so we're going with it. So if Kenna and I are both going to try to get a loan for this $40,000 car, remember in this scenario, we're saying Kenna's credit score is 800 and mine is 600. What ends up happening? Well, Kenna is considered a super prime borrower, and I'm considered a subprime borrower. So, my interest rate on this loan as a subprime borrower would fall somewhere between 9.29% and 27.9%, with an average I can expect to be offered coming in around 11.22%. Kenna, though, with her super prime credit score, her interest rates for that same car would fall between 1.9% to 29.24%. I'm not sure how it ended up higher on the average there, but the average she could expect to pay would come in more like 2.43%. So around 2.5% compared to my 11%. That means that at the average interest rate, our monthly payments for a 6-year loan on that car would be, for Kenna, with a good credit score, $598 per month. A lot. It's a lot, but it's nowhere near as much as mine would be with a bad credit score. With my subprime poor credit, I would be looking at paying $766 per month. So
Ooh.
that means that car would be $168 more expensive per month and a total of $12,096 more expensive over the entire life of the loan, all because I had bad credit.
This is making me mad because I also had bad credit for a while for medical reasons outside of my control. Like I said, I just paid off my back surgery this year, and now I'm gonna have to pay for it. Like if I'm gonna have to pay an extra. Well, I wouldn't have to pay an extra for this Kia. But if I wanted this Kia, I
Yes.
would have to pay almost $200 extra.
Right. Yeah.
It pisses me off, man.
It's fucked up. It makes sense from that evil capitalist banking perspective, right? Like if I'm the high risk borrower in this situation, they want to get as much out of me as they can upfront just in case I default. But it is also just, yeah, really fucked up because studies show that the higher your income in general, the higher your credit score is going to be. So this means that broke people are most likely to have bad credit scores, and since having bad credit scores means you'll end up paying more in interest, credit scores become this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy for a lot of poor people, meaning they pay more for things over time than people with better scores and more money do.
Yeah, it's like, you know how they say like being poor is expensive? Because
Yes.
like I think about, okay, this is my stupid thing. Like I just think about like if you're rich, you can get a Costco membership and you can buy all your toilet paper for a year at once and then you save like $500 that year. But if you're poor, like if you're like I can't afford to buy all my toilet paper at once, also where am I going to store all this toilet paper? You just missed out on all that savings.
That's totally true.
And the toilet paper example is very stupid, but that's where my brain
No, I
goes.
think it's a great example. Also, I have a Costco membership because my wonderful friend Marcella added me to hers when her family got it for her for Christmas. So
Ooh.
I'm riding the coattails of my friend's Costco membership. But it's totally true. Even us, sometimes we go to Costco and we're like, this is an amazing deal. We literally have nowhere in our house to put this. There's just no room even if we got it. And I think that that analogy is just a different version of the boots analogy.
What's the boots?
It's basically what you said. It's just like a rich man can afford to buy, say, $100 pair of boots. This is an old thing. Now, nice boots are probably going to cost you more than $100, but for the sake of the exercise, whatever. So a rich guy can afford to buy $100 pair of boots that are going to last him 10 years. But a poor person might be only able to spend $25 on a pair of boots. And every single year, they're going to have to replace those $25 boots because they're bad quality and they fall apart. So over the course of 10 years, a poor person spends $250 on boots, but a rich person only spent $100
Yeah,
because that one pair lasted.
I thought about this all the time, like when I was like really broke, because I'm just like, oh, I can only spend this much as a time, but if I could like spend more money up front, like I would save a bunch of money.
For sure.
Same with this. That's what pisses me off about like this credit score thing. Not only because I feel like if you're gonna pay back like a loan, it should be the same as everybody else for like equality's sake. Like
Yeah.
if we're gonna do freedom and we're gonna do capitalism
And we're going to do money.
and we're gonna do money, we gotta do the equality thing.
Right. But no, so what ends up happening is life just kind of ends up being more expensive for poor people every way you look at it, and it just keeps them broke. And the weirdest thing is that the United States credit system is kind of unique in just how much influence it has over our everyday lives. So, to understand how we got here, where this arbitrary number controls our financial destiny, and because of our financial destiny, it extends into our health and our happiness and our well being, which are all obviously affected by our income and our wealth and our comfort level. We have to start at the very beginning with the history of credit.
Hmm.
Okay, so Kenna, did you ever read Debt: The First 5,000 Years by David Graeber?
No, but it's next on my list because I'm reading his final book now. The Dawn of
Oh,
Everything.
right. We're
We're
reading it for book club.
in our book club,
Yes.
which is awesome.
It is. I love our book club.
Our book club rocks.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
But I've only heard kind of secondhand things from you, and from this book, I'm kind of like in my mind, I'm like, oh, people have always just had debt or used money. And now I'm realizing, like, no, people have only used money and debt. That's very new.
Right. So, okay, I loved this book. And I actually knew nothing about David Graeber when I first started to read it. I was panicked about my money situation. I was panicked about my debt, and I was really just spiraling. And I walked by that independent bookstore in Los Feliz on like Hillhurst, Vermont.
Oh, Skylight?
Yes, Skylight.
I
That's
live
right.
right by there.
Right. So they had this book in the window, and I just saw it, and I was like, I got debt problems, just like crazy eyes, you know? Also, I've really been loving my life since I decided to reclaim crazy and psycho. Once I got a few diagnoses, I was like, you know what? These are my words, and I'm taking them back. So that's improved my quality of life. Anyway, I saw this book in the window and I was like, yeah. And I bought it because I needed to understand my life and debt and how everything works. So, if you don't know, David Graeber is an anthropologist who studies a lot of early human history through a political lens. And this book just blew my mind. So, what Graeber says is look, a lot of the way that we think about the history of money is pretty flawed and lacks historical basis. First of all, debt has actually existed long before money ever came into the picture. And it had to in societies with farming because farming is naturally cyclical. So the farmer has nothing to contribute to the community while the crops are growing. But when the crops are harvested, then everyone in the community eats. In the meantime, though, the farmer still needs to live. Otherwise, who's going to harvest the crops, right, and plant the next year's? So he needs things from his community. And as Graeber explains, before money, communities had sort of a social currency that manifested as a cyclical gifting economy. So basically, people just gave shit to their neighbors because they knew they might need something from their neighbors one day. And they knew that communities are more likely to survive hardship when they work together. It wasn't like barter. Nobody kept track of anything. They just kind of vibed it out and took care of each other.
I love a good vibin'.
We love a vibe out. So just hearing this alone made me feel so much better about having so much debt because debt is kind of a human quality, a human trait, because so much of humanity is socially motivated and relies on us giving to one another. Like we need to give things to each other and take things from each other in order to survive because we're social creatures. And I like kind of understanding, before money, just the idea of give and take as like a social exchange. So then the idea of debt actually being something that could consume and control people, that didn't emerge until we started keeping track of debt, like recording it in 3500 BC in the Sumer civilization. So in Sumer, 89% of the population lived in cities, and there bankers would begin to give loans for agricultural purposes. Once farmers began to get tracked for their debt, they would often end up in so much debt that their children would have to be forced into debt peonage, which is like debt slavery, to repay the farmer's debt to the community. So this was a big change from before when people would just be like, yeah, we take care of the farmer takes care of us. In this city, they were like, no, we loan you concrete and tangible things. You farm, you fail to repay it. You are in a constant cycle of debt now because we've been keeping track and it's not enough. And now also we take your children. So this caused a ton of social tension, as you can imagine. And periodically, kings would have to just cancel all existing debt to keep the people kind of at bay, because otherwise, they would just behead them and start a new system instead. So once the people got really upset and they were like, we got too much debt and this is fucked up, the kings would be like, all right, fine. You know what? All the debt's canceled. We're clearing the slate. We're starting again. Which is interesting because we hear about people calling to just cancel all debt in the United States. I'm like, wow, there really is a historical social precedent for that. Sometimes it balloons out of control and you got to just cancel it all out and start with a clean slate.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I think the bare minimum.
The bare minimum.
Like, it's sometimes you got to get people along on the ride, but it's like the bare minimum, just no debt.
No debt.
Just wipe everything clean. Because also, we go into debt for the stupidest shit, like back surgery and IMAX.
Yeah, and IMAX.
Wait, the iMac?
Oh, IMAX. Yes. I was like the movie theater, but it's the computer too.
The
yes.
computer.
I'm like, IMAX, how much IMAX are you seeing?
I'm only in debt debt because I bought a fucking IMAX. I just had to experience space in 3D.
But
I had
no,
to see Minions in 3D.
I would pay for that. But like, yeah, the thing you said is about like back surgeries, like nobody should have to pay for that. I mean, I don't think anybody should have to pay for anything, but if we're triaging the things people should not have to pay for, medical care, top of the list. So, okay, in Israel, this periodic canceling of debts, like back in the day, used to happen every 50 years per Leviticus, and it was called the Law of Jubilee. So, Graeber does this great job in this book in talking about how we attach ideas of debt to ideas of morality and sin, which Kenna kind of talked about at the beginning of the episode. And Graeber explains why we feel so much guilt for our debt in society, when in actuality, society has been set up from the jump for us to be in debt to each other. And it wasn't until institutional power systems began keeping track of that debt that everything got so fucked up. So, after Sumer and Babylon in 1800 BC, the Code of Hammurabi was introduced, which created the first known formal laws regulating credit and debt. So, this established maximum legally allowed interest rates. So, loans of grain, for example, could only have up to a 33.3% interest rate accrued per year. Loans of silver could only have 20% per year. And these loans would have to be witnessed by a public official and recorded in a contract. So then in 50 BC, that's like a big jump, we got the Roman Republic going on, and we see evidence of complicated debt and credit records going on here. Like Cicero, for example, writes about his neighbor buying some land for 11.5 tons of coins, and Graeber's like, obviously, I don't think this was Graeber, actually. This is a different historian that I got this info from. But also, if you're ever curious about my sources, I put them in every episode. So please scroll down and check them out because I do include them. But this historian was like, look, like this doesn't mean that Cicero's neighbor like brought 11.5 tons of coins through town on carriage, right? That would just be impractical. And when you look into the notes, like, yes, Cicero confirms that this purchase was made via credit. So meanwhile, there's like the Christian Bible stuff going on right around this time. And we start to see lots of those ideas about debt that were floating around get recorded in the Bible. And it's weird because, like a lot of things in the Bible, there's a lot of conflicting info. It's really contradicting itself a lot. So in Deuteronomy 15:1, it says, debt is to be released. And in Nehemiah 10:31, it says, forego the exaction of every debt. But then on the flip side, we got like in Kings 4:7, and then there's a 2 in front of the Kings, and I'm not a Bible person, so it's like 2 Kings 4:7.
I think it's Kings 2:4-7.
Oh yeah, okay. That one's like pay your debts. And then also in Romans 4:4, it's like wages, like a debt owed must be paid. So we got some different Bible vibes. We got some people being like, don't pay debt, just let it all go. And then we got some people being like, pay your debt, you piece of shit. And it's conflicting info. And
I feel like it's kind of like, if someone owes you money, just let it go, man. But if you owe them money, you should probably pay them back.
oh, I could see that.
I could see, but I don't know if I got it right. But I'm like, this is not very clear. This is what I would gather. But to me, it's just like, kind of like, yeah, if you loan your buddy $200, don't expect it to get it back.
Yes, that makes sense to me.
But if you borrow $200 from your buddy,
Try to pay it back.
Try to pay him back.
Try to pay back. I actually like that. That's how I live my life. Never loan anything that you would be unhappy if you never got it back.
I always consider a loan a gift.
That's what I do too. And if I get anything back, I'm pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is all interesting because the Bible too, it refers to literal money debts, but also in the same breath, it refers to social debts. And this kind of goes along with the moralizing about debt that we saw Graeber talk about in his book. So as we get kind of past the Jesus Christ stuff and enter the Dark Ages in Europe around 800 AD, we see the Roman Empire collapse and economic activity kind of gets all wobbly and weird and just kind of stops for a while. So at this point, the Christian church bans usury, which is the practice of charging interest on loans, for all laymen under Charlemagne's rule from 768 to 814 AD. And there's this Bible verse, Luke 6:35, where they say, lend expecting nothing in return. And that's kind of the basis for this decision and also kind of how Kenna and I live our lives, man.
Yeah. If you can't afford to lose it, don't lend it.
Yeah.
Hard lesson learned.
Hard lessons learned. It'll save your friendships. It'll save your relationships.
Just if you can't afford to lose it, you can't afford to lend it.
Yep. So it's not until around 1500 AD after this when European explorers and merchants start trading in a major way, and we see that Europe's kind of in need of a like credit system overhaul, not like actually, but to support all these European explorers and merchants who are patting themselves on the back, right? So credit starts to emerge again. And this kind of drives a resurgence in the modern idea of banking. So in 1545, we see the Reformation happening, and England becomes the first European country in modern times to establish a legal rate of interest across the board. This is under Henry VIII, and this rate is set at 10%. And of course, the emerging new capitalist fanboys, they don't like this one. So in 1776, Adam Smith writes, of course, The Wealth of Nations, which is kind of the book that lays the foundation for contemporary capitalism as we think of it today and inspires the new United States government that at the time is in the process of writing the Declaration of Independence, right? So, a key feature in the Wealth of Nations is this idea that competition and free exchange are awesome things. And oh my God, they're under threat. The government is threatening your free market. So, we need as small of a government as possible to let the free trade flourish. So, this is our original free market fanboy here, right? Adam Smith. And the USA is obviously super inspired by this shit. They're like, fuck yeah, Adam Smith. And they integrate a lot of this capitalist nonsense into our new political system emerging at the time. Now, in the 1700s in the United States, there already kind of was an informal system of credit going on. Local country storekeepers would sometimes loan things to neighbors, and they would usually just ask other neighbors just to like vouch for people. It was a little bit messy, right? Like sometimes you'd ask Joe the butcher what he thought of John the baker, and Joe would be like, fuck John. I caught him kissing my wife. And then you'd have to be like, does that mean he'll pay me back? You know, it was messy, but it was largely just like a small community affair. So a few years later, we're in 1787, and this philosopher, Jeremy Bentham, inspired by all the capitalist fanboy shit going on at the time, writes this thing called A Defense of Usury. That's like, oh my God, the government should totally not be restricting interest rates. Ugh, because it hurts capitalist innovation. You're hurting our businesses. Let us charge whatever interest rates we want. And this leads up to, modern consumer credit as we think of it. So, that same year, the US Constitution authorized Congress to establish uniform bankruptcy laws throughout the United States. And this is pretty interesting because it kind of changed how people thought about loaning money. Suddenly, if someone could just declare bankruptcy and not pay you back, you had to be more careful with who you lent money, right? You couldn't just be like, well, John says you're cool, so here's a fuck ton of money, because that person could be like, haha, joke's on you, I'm not cool, fuck your money. And this was just like, people were kind of like, oh, okay, obviously it's good for people to have a bankruptcy option in the system, but the businesses were running scared. And again, this is all on the heels of all that capitalism, free market shit, which, we've talked about before, just means freedom for your business to fuck people over, right? That's what all these people really want. So in 1800 in the United States, the US Bankruptcy Act was officially passed by just one vote. So that tells you the tensions right now around, money and lending and the debtor and how that all plays out in society in this new form of capitalism. Very, very tense. But this was the first federal bankruptcy law in the United States, which allowed district court judges to appoint non judicial commissioners to oversee and help administer bankruptcy proceedings. And this applied solely to merchants who owed money. And cases were initiated by creditors who lent them the money and were like, hey, I'm not getting this back, basically. The act allowed bankruptcy of debts if 2/3 of the total creditors the business owed money to or the merchant owed money to agreed they needed to proceed with bankruptcy. In 1803, though, the law was repealed because it was really expensive to administer. It became quickly very corrupt. And the federal government was like, you know what, states, you just got to handle this on your own. So then in 1803, when this law was repealed, another thing was happening too. And this was over in England, which was that credit reporting as an institutional thing really started to emerge. Basically, this group of English tailors got together and they started sharing information about customers they had who owed them money. And this actually became the first recorded account of credit reporting. So what we see going on in the early 1800s is kind of, the continuation of that tension between debtors and creditors and businesses and people. And in 1819, the US Supreme Court barred states from discharging debts or releasing liability of debts to citizens of other states. So they were really hammering home, like, hey, you know what? We don't want to get involved in this. Just, it's all up to the state. And your state can't interfere with other states. You all just got to figure out your own thing. So then by 1826, back over in England, the Manchester Guardian Society was formed. And they began issuing this monthly newsletter that just kind of put debtors on blast for not paying their debts around town. This shit was wild. It was literally just like a monthly newsletter that's like, Jake's a piece of shit.
Wait, that's like, okay, in Portland, there was this magazine that just showed mugshots that you could get at like the liquor store. And people were always like, I got my mugshot in the magazine. And like, I forget what it was called. I feel like it was like Crime Stoppers or something.
Oh, I remember Crime Stoppers being a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like all just the mug. And I was just like, I can't believe this shit is legal.
Okay, so this was basically what the Manchester Guardian Society was doing, but just with debtors and words. They were just like, this guy owes on this money. And it was kind of like, if you were a merchant or a business, you'd get it and you'd read it. And then I guess you just have to remember everyone's name and hope they didn't come into your store. I don't know. It wasn't super effective.
Keep a Rolodex?
Yeah, maybe you just like keep a list in alphabetical order. I don't know, whatever.
Sounds like a nightmare.
But this like emerging consciousness amongst merchants about like, oh shit, we might be like extending credit to people who are going to fuck us over. This was starting to feel more important because in 1837, there was a literal panic due to merchants overextending credit to their clients here in the United States. And it got so severe, this overextension of credit, that coupled with some other factors, it launched a full-scale like economic depression.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, they were being a little loosey-goosey with their credit. And, capitalism it's a rickety bitch, right? It's not... She's not super stable. It's
like the 100-year-old roller coaster.
Yes.
Do you really want to ride it? It's wooden. Someone lost an arm last year.
Right. So capitalism, if you're too loud next to it, if you step too heavy, the whole thing collapses. We know this now. We've actually lived through 3 collapses because we also lived through the dot-com bubble burst, which was a collapse.
I just don't remember it because we were so young.
Right. So it falls apart a lot. So basically, some merchants overextending credit to a few guys named Bob made the whole thing go kaput in 1837. So everybody's freaking out and they're like, we gotta figure this out. So in 1839, federal law made it officially illegal to put people in prison for not paying back debts because there was this crisis going on and like everybody owed money and the federal government was like, we can't put everybody in prison for owing money. The economy's going to grind to a halt. So they're like, look, we know a bunch of you owe money. You can't just put people in jail for it anymore. We need them doing things. We need them working to kind of get us out of this depression because the depression lasted a couple years. This was no small thing. So then in 1841, this important thing similarly happened in England. This guy, Lewis Tappan, formed the Mercantile Agency, which was similar to the English tailors of 1803. Just a bunch of merchants tried to systematize rumors about debtors around town and tried to find a way to keep track of the character and assets of people they were extending credit to in their shops. So, Lewis Tappan solicited information from people across the entire country on prospective debt clients and kept these massive report ledgers in New York City. So this was kind of like a across the ocean ordeal. This was really complicated. And in 1841, also, the US government tried to do another federal bankruptcy law, and then everyone kind of hated that one too. So by 1843, it was repealed as well. So they're really trying to get a hold of things. Then in 1853, all of these kind of word of mouth credit checks had become so mainstream that Hunt's Merchant magazine published writing from a contributor at the time who said, "Go where you may to purchase goods. A character has preceded you, either for your benefit or your destruction."
Ooh.
So he's basically like, all these fucking merchants, they're talking, and they might not fucking like you. And if you go into a store, that person behind the counter might already know shit about you, and they might just be like, nah, you're fucked, dude. Or they might be like, I've heard good things about you. Here's all the credit your heart desires. So then by 1857, there started to be more of these credit reporting agencies popping up in the mix. So we had Lewis Tappan's mercantile agency, right? But a rival, the Bradstreet Company, tried to create this pseudo-scientific approach to more easily organize this data. Because if you think about it, the data they're really collecting is just like asking a bunch of people if they fuck with someone, right? They're like, you fuck with this guy? Is he cool? What's up with him? And then whatever the person said, you'd have to like keep notes of it in this really complex way and just be like, well, Jane said he's ugly and she hates him. And then you're like, okay, what do I do with that? Okay, I'm just going to write that in his report, I guess. So it's
Oh.
just like all these really weird, petty things people were trying to keep track of. So, at this time, 1857, the Bradstreet Company is like, look, we got to make more sense of this. We got to systematize this somehow. Then, if we jump ahead a couple of decades later, 1864, in New York, here in the United States, on the eve of the Civil War, right? R.G. Dunn and Company, which is the new name for Tappan's mercantile agency, they finally create an alphanumeric system for tracking the creditworthiness of companies that borrow money. And this is just for companies that borrow money. And this system was super popular and it actually remained in use until the 1900s. But again, only applied to companies borrowing money, not to like individual consumer credit. Eventually, Tappan's new R.G. Dunn and Company would merge with Bradstreet, their competitor, and together they would become Dunn and Bradstreet, which kind of like was this huge credit reporting entity for a while. So then the next year, 1865, Civil War in the United States coming to the end, and the United States has three main pillars of credit reporting officially in place. We've got private sector mass surveillance that made these credit reports possible. We have bureaucratic information sharing that made them widely available. And we have a rating system that made them actionable. So in 1867, 2 years later, the USA also passed the Bankruptcy Act, in which Congress called district courts constituted courts of bankruptcy. And this act allowed composition agreements, which meant that debtors and creditors could negotiate repayment for less than the full amount owed when someone declared bankruptcy. So this act also included corporations under bankruptcy law for the first time. And a couple of years later, this act was amended to include a section where debtors could create a plan for how to distribute their assets amongst creditors they owed money to help settle their cases. However, by 1878, again, people were really mad about this. They released cost too much to administer still. It's still corrupt. And then Congress repealed it all again. So it's really, we're struggling to come up with a comprehensive way to handle bankruptcy when someone isn't paying their debts back. Finally, in 1898, Congress passed an act that actually managed to stick around for 80 years called the Bankruptcy Act of 1898. And here they appointed referees in 2-year terms by district judges to oversee bankruptcies when people couldn't pay back their debts. And this act was actually seen as being very pro-debtor, which kind of disrupted the capitalist free market ideas pretty early on. Then in 1899, Atlanta's Retail Credit Company was founded. Sometimes they're called RCC. And they started to keep just a list of who they deemed to be credit-worthy customers. And this was at the consumer level, not at the business level. And Retail Credit Company, RCC, they later changed their name to Equifax. Yes, they've been around for a
Whoa!
long time.
Origin story.
Right. And today, Equifax is one of the oldest of the three major credit agencies in the USA. But at the time, Retail Credit Company, or RCC, they developed these really in-depth private files on millions of Americans. Not just on like their credit history and their, history of repaying debt, and not just even on the capital they had access to and their character, but also on like weird fucked up shit like their social lives, their political leanings, and their sex lives.
What?
Yeah, so it was like this weird national spy agency that would just secretly gather as much fucking data as they could on everybody and keep it in these handwritten ledgers.
So they're just doing it like old-timey steampunk style instead of like new-timey Facebook style.
Yes, so they're collecting all the data
Like
like
I mean,
Facebook.
it's steampunk.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
It is kind of steampunk. Yeah. They don't have Facebook to just siphon all your data. They're doing it like with spies and shit. They're like
doing it with cogs
they're doing
and
it
goggles.
steampunk style. Yes. And it's weird. And of course it's super private. You don't know what the RCC has on you. You don't know if they have anything on you. But every time you go somewhere and apply for a line of credit, the person behind the counter might be contacting the RCC to see what they've dug up on you. So we could see it's
They're like, "This guy is too horny to have credit."
basically, they're like, he's a sexual deviant. We can't loan him money. This happened all the time. So, we can start to see some ethical issues. Even if you don't think just like capitalism existing itself is an ethical issue, we see additional ethical issues kind of emerging as soon as we start keeping track of this credit system stuff in a major way. So, this brings us to the early 1900s, all right? It's 1912. We've got a national association forming of credit managers who usually worked for just individual shops or stores. And the association allowed them as an industry to work on their practices of collecting data, sharing info about prospective, people they loaned money to, and codifying information on retail debtors, just individual people. And around this time, too, we've got people starting to make cars that are relatively inexpensive, right? We got like Ford, General Motors. They're targeting American families, and they're like, look, it's an affordable car. But most American families can't afford to just buy these things outright in cash, like no matter how affordable people think they are, right? So what ends up happening is in 1919, General Motors starts loaning consumers the money they need to buy a new General Motors car. They popularized this idea of installment plan financing, and consumers, just regular people like us, they only needed to pay 35% of the car's cost up front. That was the down payment, and the rest was paid on credit provided by General Motors. So by 1930, consumer goods in the US were taking off thanks to industrialization, right? And all sorts of appliances started to follow this model. Now you can get like a washing machine or, I don't know, like an oven, all available to be purchased in installment plans where you pay every month to the company you bought the thing from. And by this time, 2/3 of all cars in the United States are purchased on credit via installment plans like this. So by 1936, Time magazine was writing articles about these people they referred to as credit men. So these would be people in the National Association of Credit Men, which was at the time the second biggest trade organization in the United States, with 20,000 members, only exceeded by the US Chamber of Commerce. So this association, called NACM, brought together people from different political backgrounds in the interest of upholding profit and money in the eyes of capitalism. As this 1936 Time magazine article says, whether a Democrat or a Republican sits in the White House, bills must still be collected. And I think that's really the heart of the American political system right there.
How
So,
come we can't have something fun? We're like, we're a nation of bill collectors. I'm like, why can't we be a nation of like partiers?
yeah, why can't we be a nation of people who do the fire breathing? That's cool. That'd be fun.
I like that we're getting all steampunk and carnival
It is
style.
very. It's got a vibe. We've got a vibe for today's
We
episode.
have a vibe.
We have a vibe, and it might be Burning Man adjacent.
It might-
Unfortunately,
Wow.
it might be. It might be. I don't know. So the NACM is featuring banks, wholesalers, and manufacturers. This membership is not available to the general public. But once you are a member, up to 3 million consumer credit reports are available on file for you to access whenever you want.
Ooh, all the secrets.
All the secrets about consumers like you and me, you can tap into that if you're part of this club. So the NACM also had a fraud prevention bureau staged entirely with what the article called one-time G-men, which is of course short for government men, showing again that the intersection of private business and government under capitalism, the myth of the free market, it's a lot different than what we're being told. It kind of reminds me of the episode we did on lobbying, where we talked about the revolving door in which government officials and Congress would be promised positions with private companies for advancing their needs while they were still serving in Congress. That episode, I think, is pretty good. It's our episode number 11, Big Oil Wants to Psyop You in the Boom Boom Room.
I forgot about that.
It was a good title. It was a good episode.
Yeah.
But it kind of reminds me of that. It's like, okay, these guys who are working in government, and what do? They get out of government and they go work this credit monitoring system where they're doing the fraud prevention and they're working for these private companies. And it's just, really kind of, what's the thing called where you have like bad motives? It's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a total conflict of interest. So, meanwhile, in 1937, Congress passes what we see will become known as Chapter 9 bankruptcy for debtors. And this is really for cities and municipalities who owe companies money to be able to be like, look, we're bankrupt. But what it kind of started is this idea that there are different types of bankruptcies. And the following year, we start to see these different types get reorganized into chapters for ease of clarity. So this includes Chapter 13, which is the wage earners bankruptcy plan. That's just like for individuals with regular income who owe a bunch of money and they can settle with their, creditors and make kind of installment payments to their debts and declare bankruptcy and pay less than they otherwise would have. Similarly, Chapter 11 is available to just like anyone, even people without stable incomes. And I think that's one of the more popular forms of bankruptcy we think of today. So we're finally getting our bankruptcy paths together for people who got in a little over their head with the debt. Okay, so then we got to the year 1950. My grandmother is 4 years old. I threw that in there because I like having a marker to kind of imagine how long ago this stuff really was, right? It's like hard to conceptualize.
Yeah, my dad was 1 year old.
Okay, oh my gosh, perfect. So this is useful. So around this time that my grandmother is a toddler, your dad is a baby, the average American middle class family just kind of owes money all over town. They have these individual deals with these individual merchants for things they purchased on those installment plans, things like, washing machines and cars. And it's kind of difficult to keep track of all these different credit accounts. So Diners Club introduces a general credit card, which can be used at lots of different merchants. Then by 1955, early credit reports maintained records on individual borrowers by sorting massive systems of index cards, which were filed away by consumer in these like floor to ceiling metal boxes, basically.
Whoa, like a giant Rolodex.
Yes, like a giant Rolodex.
I wonder if some of our listeners have not even ever seen a Rolodex.
I feel like I've only seen one like twice.
Yeah, I've only seen one like as a kid. I worked up in an office in like the early 2000s.
Me too.
Last
That's
time
where
I
it
saw a
was.
Rolodex.
Yes, it was on some like old school dude's desk. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad still has a Rolodex.
Wow. Yeah. So basically, remember how I said that like the way they started to develop these credit profiles, which is through like weird straight up spying? Yeah, so this is still what's going on in 1955, basically. These people who work as credit reporters, they're keeping track of information on all these consumers just by doing things like reading local newspapers from all over the country to find news about people who were arrested, people who were promoted at their jobs, people who got married, and people who died. And they used all of this info to compile these index card reports on as many people as they could. So it was very bizarre and labor intensive spy networking, basically, to figure out how as many Americans as possible were doing financially. So the following year after this was kind of a common practice we see happening for maintaining credit reports. 1956, we see the Fair Isaac and Company, aka FICO, get their start selling credit scoring algorithms to individual businesses and creditors. Then in 1958, Bank Americard, which is now known as Visa, drops its first credit card in, do you know where?
Where?
My glorious hometown of Fresno, California.
Wow.
Yes, we were the first people to get the Visa card. And they drop it as a trial run, right? Encouraging local businesses to accept the credit card and allowing consumers to use it for a wide variety of purchases, basically whatever their hearts desired. And they were just kind of testing this out. And it went really well. Fresnans love debt. I guess that's where I get it from. It's in my history. And this thing takes off. So soon American Express and MasterCard follow, and we start getting the credit cards we think of today. By 1960, American credit bureaus were issuing 60 million credit reports every year, all with data kept in filing cabinets and information transmitted via telephone and mail.
Whoa.
So pretty analog process, doing a lot of work. Then 1964 comes around, and the Association of Credit Bureaus in the US conducts studies about how computer technology could possibly be used to monitor consumer credit reporting. And people are starting to use like standardized credit application forms, meaning data is getting easier to synthesize. And everyone's like, okay, we can probably do this more efficiently with a computer than with index cards, right? They're not wrong. They're not wrong. Then 1970 hits. So 1970, my mom is 4 years old at this point. Again, I don't know how that's relevant. It just kind of helps me understand the generational reference points. And the first Fair Credit Reporting Act was passed in the United States, which provided a standard legal framework for credit reporting agencies. And this required bureaus to open their files for the public to see, no more of this like weird, sneaky spy shit about your sex life. And also, it forced them to delete any information they had about somebody's race, sexuality, or disability from the records. And they also had to delete negative information after a specific amount of time. And this was major for a lot of reasons, right? Had some transparency, and that transparency alone was key because, again, for years you had no way of knowing if information was even being collected on you. And if it was, you had no way of viewing that information, right? The credit reporting agencies just had their top secret files. So 1975 is the year we officially see RCC turn into Equifax, and they kind of continue this path towards computerizing credit data. Now, by the 1980s, we see the three biggest credit reporting agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion here in the United States, officially able to cover the entire country thanks to computer technology. Okay, so then 1989 comes along. And this is where I'm 3 years old, Kenna is 4 years old, and this is where the FICO score as we think of it today comes out. The FICO score was commissioned by the three big credit reporting bureaus at that time by that company, Fair Isaac and Co., abbreviated to FICO. And the FICO score quickly became a standard system to measure credit scores based on what they considered to be objective factors in data. Keyword what they considered, right? There's a lot of biases going into this shit. And today, 90% of the largest institutions in the United States use your FICO score to assess your credit risk. And the FICO score is calculated like this: 35% is based on your payment history. And again, just towards debt, right? Not towards, just like regular things that aren't debt based. 30% is based on the amount of money you owe in total. 15% is based on the length of your credit history, right? They want to see longer, longer is better. 10% is based on your credit mix, which is just like, do you have a bunch of credit cards? Do you have a bunch of loans? They want to see like a mix of it. And 10% is based on new credit inquiries. So, if you're out around town trying to take out a bunch of credit cards all at once, it's going to raise some red flags. They're like, what happened to you? You're broke. So 1989, this year is significant when it comes to credit scores because this is when most people today agree that the credit system we know and use every single day of our lives here in the United States, it can all be tracked back to that FICO score coming out in 1989. The FICO score was so prevalent from that point on that nearly every person in America would have a codified financial identity for the rest of their lives. Now, in 2006, a new type of score was created to rival the FICO score, and this is something called a Vantage score, but it's only used really by 10% of the largest banks. And the Vantage score was a joint venture between those top three credit scoring agencies, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And this model is what they all now use to calculate your scores, which is different than the FICO model a little bit. Your Vantage scores with Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion still might vary a little between the companies because the three bureaus have slightly different timelines of updating info and recording things. But in general, it's the same process they're all using, which breaks down like this: 40% is your payment history, 21% is the age and type of credit, 20% is your percentage of credit limit used, 11% is total balances or debt owed, 5% is recent credit behavior. So that would be the things like the, hard inquiries that are made when you're like, I need a loan. If there's a whole bunch of them, that's a red flag. And worth noting, that's not the same thing as just like checking your own credit score on your bank's website or like on an app on your phone. This has to be like a hard credit report that you authorize and sign for. And 3% is just how much available credit you have. So that brings us to today, where our credit scores exist as this marker of our financial identity, and they still carry with them some of those biblical morality implications, where the lines between debt as a financial obligation and a social obligation, they can get a little bit murky. We as a culture tend to view having good credit as being pious or moral, and having bad credit as being dishonest or shameful. In reality, though, these credit scores tend to be kind of arbitrary at best. And at their worst, they can be a visual indication of classism and the continued exploitation of the poor. So, this obviously brings us to the problems with how our credit system works today. So from the jump, the idea of social credit in societies with as much racism and classism as the United States has always have, that's just like always going to be kind of flawed, right? Like remember kind of when we were talking about how like if you wanted to originally figure out if somebody was trustworthy, you just have to ask like somebody around town, and that person could have all sorts of biases.
Yeah, they could just be like, yeah, that guy cheated at checkers one time.
Right, exactly. Like fuck Bob. So, as early as 1841, when Lewis Tappan launched that makeshift credit agency, reports about prospective debtors, they were largely taken from predominantly white men. And there was this rampant racial, class, and gender bias included in all of these kind of assessments of how trustworthy they thought somebody was. So, I have some quotes from Time magazine about things people said about potential, debtors back in the day. And just so you know, I don't think that there are, I don't think these are necessarily slurs, but they are racially charged words that are hard for me to say,
Oof.
but they are not officially slurs. So, but I think it's important just so you know the basis on which our modern credit reporting system is founded. So, according to Time magazine, if we're talking about back in 1841, the Lewis Tappan kind of era of credit agencies, one credit reporter from Buffalo, New York, for instance, noted that prudence in large transactions with all Jews should be used.
Oh.
Yeah, real anti Semitic, real anti Semitic. So, right away, if you're a Jewish person, you're like, hey, I would like some credit. They're like, fuck you, right? Bad anti Semitism. So, another one said, a reporter in post Civil War Georgia described A.G. Mark's liquor store as a low Negro shop.
Ooh.
So they're like, don't trust anything that happens over there. Those are black people. Really racist. Really fucked up and racist. So, when they weren't downright fucking offensive and racist, there were also just kind of these useless assessments thrown in there. So, one report from Tappan's mercantile agency on a man named Charles Dole said about him, there's a good prejudice as among the trade, enjoys generally a poor reputation as a man, but is generally supposed to have money.
What does that even
You're
mean?
just like, people don't like him, but we think he has money, maybe? Like, it's not really.
For a second, I thought it meant something else.
I mean, I think he's just kind of like, I don't know. I just feel like none of this is really useful. So it's like, okay, you get a bunch of racism or you get a bunch of hearsay, is basically what I took from this.
Yeah.
So these reports were chaotic, jumbled messes of discriminatory opinions from wealthy white merchants about the buying class, coupled with general notions of how likable or dislikable a few people thought someone was. One person back in the 1800s noted that the mercantile agency might well be termed a bureau for the promotion of honesty because there was such a strong moralizing element to these reports. Like, if the mercantile agency thought that you weren't trustworthy, it basically meant you were a bad fucking person.
Okay, here's the thing though. How many people do you know or have you met who are just like pure grifters, but they are so charming? You're like, yeah, I trust this guy.
One person, she was the most charming person I've ever met.
Well,
Everyone loved her.
that's the thing. It's like we all know people who everyone is like, I love them. And then they fuck you over. That
Yes.
happened to me. That's
Yeah,
happened to
it
you.
happened to me
And
too.
those people are like come off so charming, so gracious. And I'm just like, but then there's some people, who are, it's funny. I have a friend who I love like this, who's just like grumpy as shit, like always grumpy. And you're like, oh, like a lot of people would think you're unpleasant to be around, but you know what? She is so fucking loyal and so like has your back in times of need. But most people would be like, I don't think I would trust her. But I'm like, she's so trustworthy.
Right. So I think the thing is, like, we're really bad at guessing who's gonna fuck us over.
Oh my god, people are so bad at guessing who's gonna fuck them over. Why do you think it's called a confidence game?
Yeah. So, okay, as early as 1968, even, there were also all these objections about even codifying these handmade invasive credit reports into computer form. So, when RCC first announced plans to take their credit monitoring system digital, and remember, these were the people who were monitoring everything about debtors down to how they fuck, people lost it. Right? You get it though. You're like, this is fucked up. I don't want this getting codified anywhere. So, a 1968 New York Times article by Alan Weston said, almost inevitably, transferring information from a manual file onto a computer triggers a threat to civil liberties, to privacy, to a man's very humanity because access is so simple. So Weston basically thought that these digital records would basically make it impossible for anyone to ever outrun their past or change or grow as a person, but also that like anything bad anybody ever thought about you, even if it came from a place of prejudice, would end up in this system as though it were real and true. And this kind of brings us to the main culprit of every episode. It's racism, right? So, racism got so fucking integrated into our US credit reporting system, we can't shake it today. It's still there. So, Brenda Palms Barber, who's the executive director of the North Lawndale Employment Network, says the racial wealth gap is real and credit scores are a big part of that. So, Black and Hispanic Americans today often have lower credit scores than their white peers. And given the history of credit reporting, some of the shit we heard, it is not hard to see why. We touched on this a bit in our episode about AI, which was episode number 9 called The Racist Ghost in the Machine. But we find that when we codify and systematize data in the effort of pursuing this like bias free system, we usually just build algorithms based on historical data. And historical data was all super fucking racist. So, data shows that more than 1 in 5 Black consumers and 1 in 9 Hispanic consumers have FICO scores below 620 or subprime, meaning they are targeted for higher interest rates on things like car loans or credit cards. Meanwhile, only 1 out of every 19 white people fall into the sub 620 category. So, we see right away that your credit score is a pretty good indicator of what race or ethnicity you are. And also, I just want to note, people go back and forth between what terms they use, like Hispanic or Latino, throughout all of this. I'm reading a lot of data off. So some people say Latinx. I know a lot of people don't like Latinx as terminology, but that's just like what the person I'm quoting says. Some people say Hispanic. I know a lot of people don't like that. So I just want everybody to know, not my words, the data words. And I actually don't know what words people prefer for that designation. So if you would like to tell me, I would be very grateful to hear that. So anyway, around 54% of Black Americans today report having no credit or a poor to fair credit score, which is considered to be any score below 640, according to a recent survey of 5,000 American adults. And about 41% of Hispanic Americans report falling into this category as well. By contrast, only 37% of white Americans report the same. So the reason is that there's this inextricable way that poverty and systemic racism interact in our society. Over half of Black Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, often because of things like hiring discrimination, which could affect their payment history and the rate at which they use credit to get by. And Black Americans also tend to have higher rates of student loan debt, while only half actually own a credit card. 30% of Black and 25% of Hispanic Americans feel they never had a chance to build good credit and believe that the system was stacked against them from the start, with similar accounts reporting that they were misinformed or tricked during their first experiences with credit. Only about 18% of white Americans, though, say they felt similarly deceived when entering the world of credit and debt. According to Forbes, to date, FICO considers payment history, amounts owed, length of credit history, new credit, and credit mix in its model. But that data may have been influenced by generational wealth that many Black and Hispanic borrowers did not have equal access to, says Frederick Weary, professor of sociology and director of the Dignity and Debt Network at Princeton University. We're often told to stop talking about history, but history won't stop talking about us, Wary says. The data used in current credit scoring models, it's not neutral. It's a mirror of inequalities from the past. By using this data, we're amplifying those inequalities today. It has a striking effect on people's life chances. Many Americans have inherited wealth through home ownership, one of the prevailing ways people accumulate wealth. However, for Black Americans, a history of redlining, a discriminatory practice that makes financial services like mortgages unattainable for people of a certain race or geographic location, and outright discrimination has precluded them from buying a home. So this is a practice we talked about, I think, in episode 27, which is Upzone This, if I remember correctly. And yeah, this is totally true. The history of redlining and how it affects with Black Americans' ability to build generational wealth, it's staggering the impact this has had on people today. Chi Wu, a staff attorney at the National Consumer Law Center, says, on a macro scale, you have one group that benefited from government support, and that's white people, obviously. So now you have this racial wealth gap because of that. White families built up equity in their homes, inherited wealth, while fewer Black families were able to do the same. Chi Wu says that credit scores are the perfect example of how structural racism works. Wu explains by saying, you start with Black consumers who have been denied their human rights and economic rights during enslavement and redlining and Jim Crow with legalized discrimination. Then you deprive their communities of assets. That affects the economic position of those communities, and that is reflected in credit scores. Aaron Klein, senior fellow economic studies at the Brookings Institution, says, children of wealth have been in the system for a long time. Their parents might open a credit card in their name and help them make payments each month. Children in poverty do not enter the system at an early age, and if they do, it's to inherit debt from their parents. Plenty of parents in financial difficulty take out credit in their children's name. And additionally, Black consumers bear most of the brunt from lawsuits related to debt collections, according to a Pew Research paper, which adversely affects their credit scores as well. In New York City, 95% of consumers with default debt claim judgments entered against them. They live in low or moderate income neighborhoods, and more than half of them are mostly Black or Hispanic communities, which basically means if you default on your loan, you're more likely to get taken to court and sued for it if you're Black or Hispanic than if you're white. Court judgments over 5 years in St. Louis, Chicago, and Newark, New Jersey found that even after accounting for income, the rate of default judgments in mostly Black neighborhoods was nearly double that of mostly white ones. Auto loans, too, disproportionately impact Black Americans' credit scores, since many dealers charge them more for cars and place higher interest rates on their accounts. A 2018 National Fair Housing Alliance report tested the degree to which your race can affect car prices, and it found that 62.5% of the time, people of color were offered higher interest loans compared to white people who had worse credit than them. People of color who were discriminated against were offered terms that, on average, would have resulted in them paying $2,662 more for the car, putting pressure financially and potentially impacting future payments. NCLC attorney Odette Williamson explains bad racist predatory lending as reverse redlining, especially as it applies to homes. She says Black and Latinx communities were given these loans that were just awful, terrible, not sustainable, and just blew up in your face after a while. In one of her papers, Williamson says communities of color are easy prey since they have been starved for credit for generations. The paper notes that even adjusting for income, subprime was sold disproportionately to borrowers of color. And actually, the likelihood of subprime loans being given to non white borrowers compared to white borrowers increased the higher the income bracket. So, if you add in the over policing of Black communities and the racism in our judicial system, you also have to contend with the effect that imprisonment has on a person's credit score. One indicator of that was the average FICO score for Black people who had been incarcerated, which was 200 plus points lower than that of white people who had never been incarcerated. So, yeah, obviously, what we see here is just a bunch of fucking racism. And I know about this car thing firsthand because I'm a white person and I went with one of my friends who was Black to help negotiate her car loan, specifically because she was like, yeah, they're super fucking racist to me. Like, maybe if I have a white person there, it'll kind of balance out. And she and her first car that she purchased on her own had horrible terms. I was like horrified. It was the most predatory loan I'd ever seen in my life. Like, the interest rate was almost 100% on a car purchase.
What?
It was so bad. And I went with her to do her next car thing because it was so fucked up. So yeah, just the effects lingering of racism in our credit system, it's so horrifying, gnarly, and all of like the systemic racism in our society is compounded and reflected in these credit scores, and that's how we have these racially like differential credit scores today. Like, you can almost look at someone's credit score and guess their race. That's how extreme the difference is. So another thing that is a bias built into our credit reporting system is sexism. Like, did you know that if you're a woman, you're more likely to have a bad credit score than if you're a man?
What?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it kind of makes sense, but in 2018, men had an average credit score that was 9 points higher than a woman, and a lot of this has to do with the gender pay gap. So in 2018, the median salary for women in the United States was 22% lower than for men, which is a figure that gets disproportionate when you apply race as well. Like, when you look at the intersection of race and gender, obviously this gets more extreme. So because women make less than men in general, they tend to use a bigger portion of their total available credit. And credit usage by percentage is a factor that dictates your credit score. And if you use too much of it, it can hurt your creditworthiness. So even when you take into account that women on average owe less in debt than men, around $21,000 compared to $25,000, it's still not enough to even out the score. So a man might have a higher income and therefore higher credit limits than a woman. And let's say they both go out and spend $500 on a credit card. Well, for a woman, that $500 might be a higher percent of her total available credit because her income is lower. And income is something that they take into account when they think about raising your credit limit. For a man, that $500 might be a relatively much smaller portion of total available credit, meaning it doesn't affect his credit score like it would hers.
Yeah, I love how too, like, I can just tell what they're thinking. They're like, women are just out there shopping.
You're right. Yeah.
It's like
Exactly.
that like stupid like men's rights meme of like women are shopping.
I've not seen this, but I love that this came across your
No,
internet
my
algorithms.
boyfriend's.
Oh, that's even worse.
No, I mean it's
He's
not
been
because
targeted by the
no,
alt
but
right
it
pipeline.
was someone making fun of
Oh,
that.
okay, okay, okay.
But
That's
he
good.
was just like, yeah, you know the meme, like women are shopping, and I'm like, what? I'm probably not even saying the meme right, but I was just like, is that what you guys think we do?
Just shopping all the time.
We're just at the mall.
I
We
would love that reality, actually. If that
That
could
would
be
be
my reality,
cool.
I would love to just
The
be at
thing
the mall.
is like I think regardless of people's gender, people spend the same.
Yeah,
Like,
we like spending money if we have it.
yeah,
We
that's
enjoy things.
where it's like I feel like there's women are at the mall. I'm like, everyone's buying dumb shit.
Yeah, I think also if there is like a socialized gender expectation of spending, I think one of the things I've noticed, this is colloquial, data could potentially not back this up, but my like observation is that men I know tend to make fewer purchases, but they tend to be very high dollar amounts. So like me, women I know, feminine people, we might do things like, I got a Starbucks drink as a treat, once in a while. But men I know, they're like, I spend no money. And then one day they're like, I bought a $6,000 device. And you're like,
Yeah.
what is this device? What is this?
Yeah, it's like don't spend money on coffee and avocado toast, but spend it on a fucking like oh my gosh.
Like, how many men think they're going to be professional photographers?
Oh
And then
my
they just
god.
spend thousands of dollars on this high end equipment.
$10,000 on camera equipment.
Right, exactly. This is kind of, but that's
This
again
is weird.
colloquial.
Yeah, this is like
This is not a
just in
fact.
our life.
Yes. Anyway, so that brings us to this other thing, obviously, that gets codified into credit scores, which is just classism, right? So studies show that there is a correlation between income levels and credit scores, like we mentioned. And I thought this was really interesting because the states with the lowest average credit scores as of March of 2022, they have a high correlation with the states that are also experiencing the most poverty in the United States. So that makes sense. More poverty, lower credit scores, less overall, financial access to resources. So, number one for both of these, low credit scores and most poverty, is Mississippi. If you live in Mississippi, the average credit score there is 662. And perhaps not shockingly, Mississippi is also the state in the United States with the most poverty, coming in at nearly 20% poverty rate.
Wow.
Then number two, in terms of credit scores, low credit scores, is Louisiana. The average credit score there is 670. And Louisiana also ranks second in poverty, coming in at 19%. So those
Wow.
top two are direct correlations to poverty and credit score. Then tied for third and fourth is Alabama and Arkansas, with average credit scores of 673 for both. And out of the two, Arkansas ranks fifth in the United States for poverty, and Alabama ranks seventh in the United States for poverty.
Wow.
So we see this direct correlation. The higher your income, the better your odds of having a good credit score. And there's a few reasons for that, right? Like number one, you have more money, meaning it's easier to pay your monthly bills. Duh. And number two, as Bob Anibale, the global director of City Community Development and Inclusive Finance, says, wealthier people have access to resources that can help manage credit issues like financial planners. And Ibale also says credit scores are not an art of an inclusive growing society. Oh, not part of, sorry. They're not an art either, though. I'll say that. So, in general, lower income consumers have less knowledge about financial literacy, too. And, I know it's annoying when like rich Republicans are like, you need financial literacy skills because it's like you can't financial literacy yourself out of poverty. But as somebody who did experience like a lot of issues with money management and grew up pretty broke and didn't have any like generational access to like money planning, I will say that financial literacy has been something that's helped me manage a low income a lot better. Obviously, now we're in the middle class range. It's a lot easier to manage my money. Who knew? Just giving people money makes life easier. But even when I was broke, having access to financial literacy was really helpful. And the whole way I even figured out that financial literacy knowledge could help is because I started thinking about all those studies about people who win the lottery, and there's people who win the lottery. Some people, they spend it all and it goes away within a couple years, right? And some people who win the lottery, they're able to make that sustain them for a really long time. And I was thinking about that with the differences. And I think the difference is just if you know how to invest money in a way that gives you permanent returns within our current system of capitalism. And if you don't, you just spend it all without realizing you can put it in assets that go up in value. And that is an element of financial literacy. And that's kind of what started me on my whole path to even trying to buy a house instead of renting, because I realized that a house is something that goes up in value. If I buy a house, my monthly payments are going to stay the same even as inflation goes up. So, I will say that I think poor people, we deserve access to financial literacy so we can make good decisions. I think we already make good decisions with the limited resource when we're given them. But I think that financial literacy can also go a long way so you have the info you need to make the decisions that are best for your life. Even though we all know the thing that's best for your life is just getting more money, right? But a good example of this is that people with an income of under $25,000 per year, only 43% even knew that consumers have more than one credit score, compared to 74% of people with incomes over 75K a year, right? So, similarly, only 66% of those low income respondents in a survey knew the best way to contest an error on your credit report if you see it, compared to 86% of people with an income over 75K. So, low income consumers are also more likely than high income consumers to consider their knowledge of credit scores to be fair or poor, 58% compared to 37%. So, broke people, we know we don't know this shit. We know it's confusing to us. We know nobody took the time to teach it to us. And, I think that that's fair. And I think that's something that really needs to be addressed and fixed, along with obviously just big picture, do away with capitalism money, small picture, more equality in society overall. But other statistics and facts that illuminate this gap in class knowledge of finances really come out when you look at surveys of low income consumers. So, in this other survey, only 22% of low income consumers knew that a $20,000 60-month auto loan, on that, a borrower with a low credit score would likely pay more than $5,000 in interest compared to a borrower with a high score. Only 22% of people understood that if your credit score is bad, that's the kind of difference you'd be looking at in your interest payments. Only 33% knew that a credit score typically measures the risk of not repaying a loan. People thought that it represented totally different things. Only 50% knew that an electric company can use credit scores to determine the amount of a deposit that they'll charge you. Nearly half of low income consumers think that a person's age is a factor used to calculate your credit score, which is not accurate. And 42% think that credit repair companies are always or usually helpful in correcting credit report errors and taking other kind of measures to improve one's credit score. So in reality, when it comes to those credit repair companies, experts agree that these companies tend to just charge relatively high fees to do absolutely nothing, or at the very least, what consumers could easily do for their own for free. And this makes low-income people at-risk targets for predatory credit repair scams, which are pretty common. So a third reason is that if you're not in a position to buy things at all, you're just going to be taking out fewer loans, right? As Ricky Granitz-Lowitz, who's the CEO and co-founder of Working Credit Educational Group, as they explain, if you don't have a credit card or an installment loan, you're not going to generate a credit score. So right away, this means you have to be engaging in the consumer buying market in a major way to even build credit. Lowitz says that a lot of people who struggle with low income believe that they should just avoid credit altogether, which is a financially prudent and sensible move, but ultimately one that they end up getting penalized for, which isn't fair. Lowitz says what's so frustrating is that a lot of the best money managers hate the thought of having debt, having a credit card. So nearly 28 million Americans are credit invisible, meaning they have no credit history with a nationwide consumer reporting agency. But this doesn't necessarily mean that they're financially irresponsible. In fact, one could argue that they are the most financially responsible among us because they are living a debt-free life within their means. However, obviously, none of this is reported in a credit score. You just won't have a credit score because you don't have debt. So another big concern that gets all wrapped up in this credit score system thing is the issue of privacy. One of the biggest concerns regarding credit scores comes specifically for the credit bureau Equifax. Unlike other credit monitoring bureaus, Equifax spreads far into other types of reporting as well, meaning the one singular company can end up with multifaceted and detailed reports about each and every one of us thanks to its many different services and subdivisions. There's the credit monitoring service, sure. There's also a division of Equifax called Insurance Information Services that handles insurance claims for companies like FedEx and compiles reports based on shipping claims filed by consumers. That division has been around since 1899. There's also a division called Physical Measurements that verifies details for life insurance applications, meaning they have access to information about your medical history, including a blood test looking for things like HIV, cholesterol, nicotine, liver function, and blood sugar levels. But they also have urine tests that look for drug use. There's a division called Osborne Laboratories that Equifax purchased to do the testing on blood and urine themselves as well. And in May of 1994, Equifax also bought Health Checks Inc., a company that specializes in physician profiling and claims reviews. They also purchased Electronic Tabulating Services, a health claims clearinghouse in Atlanta. And in 1995, Equifax and AT&T announced the launch of a joint information assault on national healthcare problems. They wanted to create a sophisticated network of medical records that could be accessed by any doctor across the country, which honestly does sound efficient and smart. Like you could go to any doctor and they'd have access to your medical records. But also, it sounds like something that should probably not be owned by a private for profit company. That same private company, too, that controls our financial future and can use this data however they see fit. They also acquired new data banks on medical information that allow hospitals to screen doctors for malpractice suits and suspect medical degrees before hiring decisions are made. And again, that's good. That's something that people should have access to. But it is concerning in the for profit system of capitalism when all of this is kind of getting muddled and mixed up with this one private company. On top of all of this, Equifax also monitors things like how many times you report a lost or stolen credit card, which can be added to your financial risk profile. Also, all the addresses you've lived in recently, who your employer is, who your family members are, and even sometimes who your like close relationships are, like friends, especially if you end up being roommates with them. Equifax also has huge data banks for the auto and home insurance industry called Comprehensive Loss Underwriting Exchange, or CLUE. It's a database that tracks your auto accidents, the number of drivers in your household, and claims on your homeowner's insurance. It's also designed to figure out when people are lying on their insurance applications. So this guy, Robert Smith, who is not our goth daddy from The Cure, but actually is the publisher of Privacy Journal based in Providence, Rhode Island, said, it's what I call an information conglomerate. And one of the big issues with all of this is that you don't even know how accurate this shit is, right? We already know there's all these biases built into the system. So a credit score is not an accurate representation of someone's financial health or how responsible they'll be with a loan. But on top of that, the information you see might not even be accurate itself. Like one of the biggest issues with the scope of these monitoring services is accuracy, as well as opportunities to rectify things like fraud or mistakes. So there's this one story of this guy in the 90s named Stephen Shaw, who had his identity stolen by another man named Stephen Shaw. So the second Stephen Shaw was a car salesman from Orlando, Florida. And in 1991, he somehow retained the other Stephen Shaw's credit report with his social security number on it. So then car salesman Stephen Shaw was like sick and opened up 35 accounts in the other Stephen's name, charging over $100,000 worth of stuff to it. Car loans, personal loans, opening bank accounts, buying stereos, buying furniture, appliances, clothes, airline tickets, you name it. Stephen Shaw on Stephen Shaw crime. So while credit card fraud is a federal crime, U.S. attorneys won't even look at it until it hits the $100,000 figure, meaning lots of people have limited recourse when this happens to them, and they rely heavily on banks or financial institutions to help them clear it out. And even with that high dollar amount, the first Stephen Shaw had to spend 4 years trying to rectify the issue. And he says Equifax fought him every step of the way. Of the experience, he says, their gross economic incentive is to sell the bits and pieces of data that make up your life as widely as possible. Their incentives are not to protect your privacy or to ensure the accuracy of the data. In 1991, Consumer Reports published a study by James Williams of Consolidated Information Service, a New York area mortgage reporting firm, which analyzed 1,500 reports from TRW, TransUnion, and Equifax, and found errors in 43% of the files. In February of 1995, the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, they announced an investigation of Equifax for violations in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. The commission reported that Equifax had failed to assure the maximum possible accuracy of the consumer credit information it compiled and sold nationwide to credit grantors, employers, and others. The Trade Commission went on to say that Equifax had maintained mixed files containing information on someone other than the person named on the report, that it had failed to promptly delete inaccurate information disputed by consumers, that information deleted from reports had a curious way of reappearing on future reports, and that Equifax had furnished consumer reports to those who had no permissible purpose under the Fair Credit Act to obtain them. And as it stands today, credit bureaus are under no legal requirement to be accurate, and credit reporting bureaus make a tremendous amount of mistakes. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, receives more credit reporting complaints than complaints in any other industry that it regulates. Now, since the 90s, Equifax, to its credit, has made a lot of effort to try to ensure the accuracy of future reporting. They've taken this seriously, they've tried to fix a bunch of things. But unfortunately, we still see that a lot of errors slip through the cracks. And when you catch an error on your credit report, sometimes it's really difficult to get it fixed. I know I've had to fix two different types of errors on mine. Have you ever tried to fix an error on your credit report?
Yeah. This company that I came to an agreement with to pay off, like, a loan said that I didn't pay them off, and I still owed them money.
How was it trying to get that fixed? What was the process like for you?
I just did it through Credit Karma.
Oh, that's pretty good. Okay, so I had two experiences. Once I was a victim of credit card fraud, identity theft. Someone stole my identity, took out credit cards in my name. I actually knew who it was. And it was so difficult trying to get it resolved that I ended up settling with every single person she opened a credit card account under individually. I just called them, told them I was a victim of identity fraud. We came to an agreement, and I still had to pay around 50% total of what
So
she took out in my name.
fucked.
Yeah, because it was basically like, well, look, you can try to contest this through this legal route, but you have very limited legal recourse. The amount was just a couple $1,000s.
Also, you knew the person,
Yeah,
and
I
oh
knew the
my
person.
I know the person.
You know the person who did
And
this to you.
I don't I think that honestly, that was the easiest way because I think they would've
That's kind of what I thought too. It's like, I'll
I
just
think
pay
they
this
would have
and get
made
it
your
over with.
life
And then I moved to another city 6 hours away.
never had to see him again.
Yes, except I did see them once at a store they worked at, and that was really weird. But anyway, so there was that. And then the second time, I refinanced the mortgage on my house, and they ran our credit scores twice. So it showed up as an additional hard inquiry on my report and brought my score down. And I had to file something with the credit. There's like an agency that kind of handles mistakes on your credit reports. And I had to file something with them online, and they got it removed. So that was a little bit easier. But if someone steals your identity, it's really hard to get that dealt with unless your bank just refunds you, basically. But if that's like if someone takes your credit card. But if someone's opening up credit cards in your name, in my experience, that's significantly more difficult to get addressed and dealt with.
Yeah, and in your case, you knew the person and they somehow figured out your social security number.
Exactly. They got a hold of my personal data, and they used that to take out the credit cards. So, on top of all of this, we know that credit scores actually are not even that effective at monitoring your financial health to prospective lenders. It just monitors your tendency to pay back debt, but your tendency to pay back debt can change depending on what's going on in your life. At my most financially stressed out, I still had a credit score of like 811. And banks were upping my credit limits to dangerous highs. They were clamoring to lend me money because my credit history showed they could reliably make more money off of me. But in reality, I was in the worst financial position of my life, bogged down with debt and a low income, and just 1 second away from it all falling apart at
Can
any
I
moment.
just tell you something? While we
Mhm.
were doing this podcast, I checked my credit score, went down 30 points.
Just right now?
Just between me checking it last week. And I'll say, you know why it was? Okay, so I was like, "Oh, my credit, I want to build my credit." I opened up some credit cards and I've just been putting money on them and paying them off. And one had really good deal on miles. So I'm just like, I'm just putting all my auto pay on there and then auto paying it off. It's like I have no debt. But because the balance showed that I owed a $1,200 on one card, it went down 30 points, even though it's going to be paid off because I have it set to be paid off every month.
Right. It's like the credit report hit before the end of the billing cycle hit.
Yes.
Yes. See, so this stuff kind of bounces
But the
all
thing
over
is,
the
it's
place.
like I'm in the best place of my life to pay back debt. Like
Right.
that I'm paying, I opened the card so now I'm just like looking and being like, so basically what I have to do is open up a bunch of credit cards and put like $10 a month on them.
Or I think probably what you can do is figure out when the credit reporting cycle hits and make sure that your auto payment to pay the card off hits before that. But it's just like a weird, fucked up game. That's
I know.
the whole thing.
I'm like
weird.
gonna have to go on Reddit after this to be like, when does this hit? And like, because it's just like, I'm gonna pay it off.
Yeah, no, that's the whole thing though. It's just not a very elegant or efficient system. And some critics of credit scores suggest using like a cash flow model instead to underwrite lending, which shows how much money people have in their bank account at any given time. But this also feels like it would disproportionately harm poor people to me.
It's all fucked.
It's all fucked. Research does show that if you combine FICO scores with that cash flow underwriting, it provides the most accurate predictive model of how people will pay. But what resonates more with me, obviously, is either making credit scores more inclusive to people who can live without taking on debt just in their normal lives, or just getting rid of them completely.
And I just go with getting rid of them completely. I mean, To me, if you're gonna lend out money, you're making money off of the interest. So just make it the same for everybody.
Right.
You're gonna make the money back. You gotta build it into your model that some people are gonna pay it off early and some people aren't gonna pay it off. So you just average all that out. And then that's fair.
Yes.
Or you base it by people's income.
Right, which is a common thing lots of other countries do that we'll talk about in a few seconds. But Talia Gillis, who's the Harvard Empirical Law and Finance Fellow, says that including monthly rental payments and credit scores helps boost Black and Hispanic consumers' credit reports across the board. And that comes down to this huge gap in Black and non Hispanic white homeownership rates. So the Black homeownership rate in the United States was just 44% at the end of 2020, compared to 74.5%, which is the home ownership rate for non Hispanic white consumers, which of course itself is then again compounded by the racial bias in credit scores. So having a bad credit score makes it harder to buy a house, and not owning a house means your monthly housing payments aren't contributing towards building your credit. With homeownership and a mortgage, your mortgage is debt, so it shows up on your credit report. But with renting, it's not. It's just an agreement, and it doesn't show up on most credit reports. Advocates similarly recommend including monthly cell phone payments on credit scores, since Black and Hispanic Americans tend to have proven long-standing track records of making those types of payments on time. So, if credit scoring was expanded to include things beyond debt, things like utility payments and rent, we would actually get a better picture of the financial health of applicants for credit and how trustworthy they are and how likely they are to pay their bills on time. More than this, though, yeah, it just seems like credit scores are something we should do away with completely, or at the very least, we should remove the non voluntary debt component, like medical bills, which affected kind of your credit score for so
Yeah.
long, or divorce settlements, or judgments from legal disputes, since that is not even consumer lending.
I would also say student loans because you're taking out that shit. I took out that shit when I was 17.
Yeah, the fact that student loans never fall off your record
And most people take them out as
as
teenagers.
teenagers, exactly.
That is fucked.
Yeah. So also, like we touched on this before, but the costs associated with having bad credit, it's fucked up. It's super fucked up. Like there's all these things in your life that are just so much harder if you have bad credit, and they adversely affect your overall financial health. And then it makes it harder for you to do things like build your credit in the future. You just get
Mhm.
like stuck in this bad system.
And you need that shit to like live.
To live, yeah. So the number one thing that comes to mind for me, we touched on this earlier, is just renting an apartment. Like, it is so hard to rent an apartment if you have bad credit. Most landlords won't rent to somebody if their credit score drops below 620. Often, you'll require a co-signer to even have a place to rent if your credit is too low, meaning you have to know somebody in your life who has good credit and is on the hook to take on, whatever if you fail to pay. And that's really difficult. 28% of Americans with poor credit said they cannot rent an apartment when they've been looking. So this is a major thing. There's other things too that get affected, obviously, like owning a house, which we talked about. You can buy a house with a pretty low credit score. It's a lot easier than I thought. But if you don't have a credit score at all or you don't have enough of a history, it's going to make buying a house significantly more difficult. There's also buying a car, which we talked about. If you have bad credit, it's really hard to get a loan on a reliable car. There's also this issue of refinancing your debt that gets difficult. Like many times, people struggling with debt will seek things like personal loans as a way to try to shift high interest debt from credit cards over to lower interest rate debt, like a personal loan. Like, for example, I did this a few times when I was struggling with debt. Like, if I had a credit card that had a 20% interest rate and I qualified for a personal loan that had a 10% interest rate, I would pay off my credit card with money from the personal loan. And then suddenly, all the amount of money I owned, my interest rate was cut in half, which helped make it easier for me to get it down. But if you have a low credit score, it really reduces your chances of acquiring any kind of financing in general, meaning you won't even qualify for that personal loan to help, ease your kind of debt situation. And many people with bad credit scores as a result of this are pushed into things like payday loans, which disproportionately target low income communities and communities of color. And these payday loans sometimes have interest rates as high as 400 to 700%.
Whoa.
Yeah, and this just creates cycles of debt that feel impossible to escape. Like when people have bad credit, they don't have access to more trustworthy, like good lenders. I put good in big air quotes because this whole system's a fucking mess, but they end up getting pushed into these really predatory, fucked up loans. The other thing that can be really affected by your credit score, which we don't think about or talk about that often, is just your ability to get a job. Like, this is one of the more horrifying things to me, but Kenna, have you ever had a credit check run on you in an interview process for a job?
I don't think so, but I've heard of people.
Right. Like one place I worked, we did have to handle millions of dollars of high end jewelry, and they ran a credit check on me to qualify me for the position. But, credit checks are getting really, really commonplace for hiring in the United States. So as of 2012, 6 out of 10 private employers reported checking the credit histories of at least some of their job applicants, and 13% conducted them on all candidates across the board, regardless of the position. So some people suggest, that employers are abusing these credit checks in a way that violates federal laws. And a lot of states like Washington, Oregon, Hawaii, Illinois, Maryland, Connecticut, and where we live, California, have all passed laws trying to regulate the process of running credit checks on applicants. So in 2012, California, where we live, passed a law saying that employers cannot review a credit report for hiring decisions or to continue the employment of a current employee. The exceptions would be if the job is with the Department of Justice, if it's like a management position, if it's a law enforcement job, or if it's a job that entails access to money, financial accounts, or personal information. And actually, reading this, I'm realizing that the credit check that got run on me because I was handling the high end jewelry, that was probably illegal. I didn't have access to money, I was just handling products.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard like they check credit scores of people who are like in Secret Service or spies because they don't want them to be bribed by foreign governments because
Right.
they have a bunch of debt.
Yes. If somebody does like run a credit check on you as an applicant, you do have some rights. Like if an employer says the credit check cost you a job offer, a promotion, or was the reason you're fired, you are entitled to see the report and they have to tell you how to get a copy from the Consumer Reporting Agency. And there is no charge for the report if you request it within 60 days. And you also have the right to dispute the accuracy. However, most employers won't tell you that it was your credit check that was the reason you didn't get hired. They'll just ghost you or come up with another reason. So, we see this being yet another way that discrimination and poverty are compounded and codified. If you have bad credit score from systemic racism or systemic classism or some intersection of both, it's going to make it harder for you to get a good job that would help potentially pull you out of those conditions, right?
Mhm.
The sixth thing that can be affected just in our day to day lives by having bad credit scores is insurance premiums.
Hmm.
Yeah, so most US states allow credit based insurance scoring, meaning that auto and homeowners insurance companies can use your credit score to determine your risk factor, and bad credit scores will make your monthly premium costs higher. So, this practice has been banned or severely limited in Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, and again in California, where we live, but it is still common in other states in the United States. The seventh is utility companies, which we talked about. Utility companies are allowed to charge deposits when you have a poor credit score. And in some states, you can even be denied access to water, electricity, and gas based on your credit score alone, meaning you would need to pay these massive deposits or have a cosigner to even have the utilities public that you need to live. And this process is even worse for internet and telephone companies. So 22% of people with bad credit in the United States say they have been denied a cell phone plan altogether because of their credit score.
Wow. You need that to live now.
You need it to live. And the eighth and last thing that can be affected, obviously, is your ability to build wealth long term. And that might sound frivolous, but what we're really talking about here is your ability to build your retirement. Having a low credit score means sometimes taking on high interest debt, which in turns means you're unable to pay it off as quickly as you otherwise would with lower interest rates. You have less money overall every month that you can put towards your savings or trying to build that retirement plan. And this is additionally compounded by being excluded from the home buying market, since home ownership is one of the few ways working class people can build substantial enough wealth over their lifetimes to facilitate retirement and the cost of end of life care. So basically, you're in this fucked up situation where because your credit score is bad, you're paying more for everyday goods than someone with good credit might be, which means your budget is getting tighter and tighter, which means you have less money that you can put towards saving for your future. And it's just this like whole compounding thing that is really, really terrifying when you think about like what you're supposed to do to live when you can no longer work as an elderly person. Like that's one of the scariest things to me. Like, what are we expecting people to do when they're no longer capable of generating an income? So, once you end up with bad credit, it's a whole mess trying to figure out how to fix it. So, when people end up with bad credit scores, we know they try all sorts of things to try to raise them, right? And a lot of the things that you think are going to raise your credit score actually end up like not working at all and making your credit score worse, right? For example, you might think, okay, I'm paying off debt that's going to raise my credit score. But if you pay off a loan, that might close the account, which then means that your total number of open accounts goes down. And if it's your oldest account, also your overall length of timeline that you've had accounts, that'll go down too, which means paying off a loan might actually lower your credit score in some situations.
I discovered that.
Yeah, but lots of people learn this the hard way and they're really confused. And then from there, lots of people get so confused that, they'll end up pursuing like a lot of things on the internet where people say they can help you build or repair credit. But in reality, there's no hard and fast rules to doing it, but there are some like general guidelines, like all you need to do this. You just have to be comfortable taking on enough debt to build a credit history in the first place, I guess, right? Like if you're afraid of credit cards, it's going to be hard for you to build a credit history. Not impossible, but harder. You have to remember to keep your total credit card utilization below that 30% limit. Like you were talking about, Kenna, you just got hit with that today, even though you're planning on paying it off in full. And you also just have to make sure you're paying your monthly bills on time each month, which setting up monthly auto payments can do wonders for that if you have a hard time remembering it. It also helps to have diverse credit, like loans and credit cards, both together, and remembering that a debit card is not the same thing as a credit account, even if you process it as credit when you're checking out on a machine. And another thing that can help too is asking for credit limit increases on your credit cards because that can help your debt to credit ratio appear lower. Some experts also recommend taking out more than one credit card to additionally help with your debt to credit ratio staying under 30%. These are just kind of the things that are like the boring rules for what you have to do to build credit, and it takes time. There is an interesting thing that's new on the market, which is where you can actually sometimes make your rent payments and utility payments count. Remember how credit scores don't usually reflect those things? Well, Experian recently has been trying to incorporate them more. And of course, that's just one of the three major credit reporting bureaus, but still, that's better than nothing. They have two things called the Experian Rent Bureau and the Experian Boost. An Experian Rent Bureau is designed to keep track of your monthly rent payments, which is a good step in the right direction. So housing counts kind of for everybody in terms of reliability of payments, not just people who own their homes. However, your property management company has to actually use it. And if they don't, then you have to find a third-party rent payment service that does to make sure it gets reported to Experian Rent Bureau and actually counts. So it's a little difficult, but something that maybe could help raise your score. Similarly, there's also that Experian Boost thing. Have you seen the commercials for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that just takes into account your phone and utility payments, which could help also raise your score overall. It includes internet and streaming services, just not traditional debt as we think about it. So these are all kind of steps towards the right direction for what lots of experts say would help make credit scores more useful and reflective of somebody's actual like reliability to make payments. And when it comes to shopping for products, you also, you're going to want to try to choose credit cards and loans that have the lowest interest rates possible and shopping around for the best offers, comparing ones you see to know what is a good deal. And if you have bad credit or no credit, you might need to start with a secured credit card, which means you put a deposit down on the credit card up front and you use it from there. So basically, it's just this slow and boring process of playing the credit game. But all of this gets complicated when these companies come in with these predatory practices offering quick fixes to your credit repairs. Like, have you seen this?
Yeah.
They're like these scams basically that can come in a lot of different ways where they'll offer to help you resolve your credit one way or another.
Oh, I've gotten letters in the mail like this before.
Yeah, they're super predatory. So credit repair scams might present themselves as a debt relief service or a debt consolidation service. And they target consumers with typically large amounts of credit card debt by promising to negotiate their creditors with their creditors for them or settle outstanding debts or repayment obligations. They often charge a large fee up front and then will fail to deliver on anything they promised you. So there are, of course, legitimate credit repair companies that dispute incorrect information on your credit reports, but that's also just something you can do yourself if you see your credit report. And too often, these legitimate services are confused for the illegitimate scam companies that promise to do like impossible things. So, since the 1990s, credit repair scams have been super prevalent in the United States. And the Credit Repair Organizations Act of 1997 established clear guidelines for what these companies were and were not allowed to do. So, these companies are prohibited from taking any payment with a consumer until they fully complete whatever service they promise. They're required to provide consumers with written contracts stating all the services that are going to be done, as well as the terms and condition of the payment. And under law, consumers have 3 days to withdraw from the contract if they get the ick. These companies are also forbidden to ask or suggest that you mislead credit reporting companies about your credit accounts or alter your identity to change your credit history. And they also cannot knowingly make deceptive or false claims concerning the services they're capable of offering. Additionally, they can't ask you to sign anything that states you're forfeiting your rights, and any waiver that you do sign cannot be legally enforced. However, despite this law, these kind of scam companies still manage to operate in suspicious and misleading ways that trick consumers into thinking that if they just pay this company a fee, they'll help make their credit score better and even alleviate some of their total debt. So these companies are really commonly caught violating the rules in that, Credit Repair Organizations Act of 1997. Lots of times they will ask you for a payment up front before they've done any work. They will promise to remove negative data from your credit report, even if it's accurate. They will ask you to mislead credit reporting companies about one or more of your accounts. They'll tell you not to contact credit reporting agencies directly, just them. They're the only ones that you should talk to. They'll suggest that you change or alter your identity to modify your credit history. They'll advise you to enter false information on credit or loan applications. And sometimes they'll just take your money and then ghost you completely. So, one of the most recent cases brought to the FTC was Boost My Score LLC, which just happened on May 6th of this year. The case is still pending, but the company allegedly had a bogus credit repair scheme known as the credit game, which, like, I don't know, the pitch was that you piggyback on people with good credit and somehow it raises your credit. Whatever the case, they were charged with promoting lies and deception. So, in the complaint filed against the credit game and its owners, Michael and Valerie Rando, the FTC alleged that the company has illegally charged consumers hundreds and even thousands of dollars for credit repair services of little to no value, and also told consumers to invest their COVID-19 governmental benefits into these unlawful services, which is just really sad because the people who are reaching out to these credit repair services, lots of times they're in a really desperate position. They're really freaked out. They're really terrified. They don't have money like this extra to spend. And these people are just preying on that panic and fear and lack of transparency and understanding of how financial literacy and the credit system even works. So it is true that debt consolidation is a thing that can sometimes help people with large amounts of debt by transferring debt on high interest credit cards to lower interest personal loans or balance transfer credit cards, like I mentioned that I did. Debt settlement and debt consolidation scams, those are a different thing, and they're not actually helping you do any of that. In a debt like settlement, as opposed to consolidation, instead of making your monthly payments on your debt or transferring it to a new source of credit with a lower interest rate, you'd be encouraged to instead pay that monthly amount you were paying on your debt to this different for profit third party company who would then hold on to your money. And when they had theoretically enough of it, they would try to negotiate with your creditors for a lower total payoff than what you owe. So the problem with these services is that they have no guarantee that they'll actually work. They'll totally damage your credit even more in the process. And again, there's lots of scams where people just take your money and then do absolutely nothing. And it leaves you with just a bunch of debt, wasted money you threw at this third party company. And in the end, your credit's even more fucked than when you started. So basically, the only road to actually repairing your credit is slow and boring and takes a lot of time. And anybody ever promising a quick fix is probably lying to you to make a quick buck off you, right? So this whole system just allows these scams to run rampant because we know credit scores impact so much of people's everyday lives, right? It's tied to our finances. Finances can be scary and emotional, and it just allows these like really nasty predatory companies to come in and profit off of people's fear when they're in the most vulnerable and low states, which itself is a reason to show just how fucked up this whole system is. Our credit system in the US basically is complicated and messy and entrenched in our capitalist free market ideas run amok, bogged down by racism and bigotry. And you know what this makes me think of, Kenna? You know how like all of the Western people are panicking over what they call China's social credit score?
Oh, yeah. It's like a credit score, but like for I don't know, different like I heard one thing that on the news like how much video games you play or something like that.
Okay, so basically all the information about this has been radically misconstrued and distorted by like Western propaganda. And the common misconception is that China has this score in place that's like Black Mirror style, and it monitors how nice you are to your neighbors, or how much video games you play, like you said, or if you're bad at parallel parking. And then if your score gets low enough, then they take away your freedoms, right? So the actual truth of this whole thing, despite all the media sensationalization, is that some cities or companies have implemented some loyalty rewards programs. No single person individual is getting penalized for having low scores of any kind in these programs. And it's not at a national level, and there are no consequences for individual people. The primary focus of the social credit score is actually on businesses and marketplace behavior.
Interesting.
Yeah, so individuals are only included if it concerns debt repayment and their role as legal representatives for companies.
Oh,
So,
okay. That seems like I'm just thinking like, wow, like Meta, FKA, Facebook, and like so like all these credit reporting companies, like I don't whoever, like the government's looking at your dick pics, like that John
yeah,
Oliver episode.
yes,
Like it's like, yeah, I think we have the same thing here.
that's what it makes
Kind
me
of.
think too. So, out of all the people who are even,
Not to say that I do not trust any government. No.
yeah, but out of all of the people who are even potentially able to be included in China's social credit score, which would be people who are representing businesses in marketplace activity, only 0.2% of those people have ever received a single penalty to their score
Hmm.
in a year. So social credit scores, they are only affected literally if you break the law in your business practice, which when you think about it sounds just a lot like our American credit system here, but it's maybe even less intense because you don't have to use it as an individual to help you get an apartment or a job.
Yeah, yeah. I just still can't believe that like to get an apartment, which you just need to function in society, you have to have a credit score, which you have to take out debt. Oh, my mind is like boggled.
Yeah, it's wild. And what we actually see is that most countries have some version of a credit score, right? Similar to China's social credit score. So companies can be involved, individuals can be involved, but usually in countries outside of the United States and maybe Canada, they're a lot less rigid and a lot less consequential to individual consumers' everyday lives. So, countries that have no credit score might include places like the Netherlands, Spain, Japan, and France. And they will take into consideration if you've defaulted on payments when they're looking at whether or not to loan you money at like a bank level to decide if you're credit worthy. But the amount would be based on your income, how much income you have, what they want to loan you, and it wouldn't be involved in things like you trying to rent an apartment. And basically, in places like this, you either have marks on your credit of non-payment or you have good credit. It's not like you have to do all these things to build up a credit score.
Yeah, it's so confusing. Like I am so pissed about me paying off my credit card at a different time than when the credit card company,
Yeah,
because it's like it's all going to be paid off in like 15 days.
right. I think the thing that gets me the most about credit scores in general is that like they're super fucking dystopian and we are able to look at any sort of credit system happening in another country and be like, "Oh, that sounds dystopian." But then it's like, well, our credit system is actually more rigid than
It's
that.
just so absurd. It's so absurd. Even if you take out the like the all the bigotry, like all the racism and sexism and like just all that shit, or like all the bad stuff, regardless, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right. Like we've created a system wherein three major faceless corporations are granted access to the most intimate details of our lives. And then they're allowed to assign a grade to us based on how good they think we are, right? Which translates culturally into how righteous, how moral, how worthy. And we go through life carrying that mark, regardless of if it's true. And we have to explain it away, if ever it interferes with our ability to just live a life. And it fails to monitor our actual financial health. And instead, it's this beacon to businesses telling them how much money they could potentially profit off of us. So we're already in the weird sci fi episode. We're like in the episode of the Orville where everyone has the scores attached to their shirts. The only difference is that we're letting companies determine our value rather than the people around us in our community. And I think that is somehow a lot worse.
Yeah, I like, me, I like a vibes model.
Yeah.
Like, also, yeah, because I feel like we kind of do it every day. Like, like sometimes even in like our households where it's like, I got you today. And like, oh, like you do that tomorrow. Like, that's basically asking someone to be in your debt. Like, if you think about like, I'm taking out the trash today, if you do the dishes tomorrow.
Yeah. And
You have no guarantee they're going to do that, but people generally fucking do.
That's what's so interesting about the David Graeber book about the first 5,000 years of debt because, like, especially prior to money, the idea of like social debt and like what we would now consider like tangible debt, like a consumer good oriented debt that's like attached to money, they really are blurred because before money, it's just favors you do for people, services you perform for
Yeah.
people that we later assigned monetary value to. So I think like the mixing of this idea of social debt and financial debt, it's really interesting because finances are how we in our current system of capitalism keep track of like the value of
You know
services.
what I hate is when people like do weird shit with money and they go, "It's not personal, man." And you're like, "It totally is."
It's all
I had
personal.
someone like lie about my business and like cost me a bunch of money and they were like, "It's not personal." And I was like, "This is personal." She's like, "We're still friends." I'm like, "No, we're not."
Right, like this is my livelihood. If you don't want me to have a livelihood that supports me, how are you my friend?
Like, yeah, I mean, this is a whole other drama, but it's just like it's so odd to me how people they're like, "Well, money and friendship are different." It's like, "No, it's not."
Right. It is because you need like how you interact with finances that like affects your well-being. That affects how well you are, like the material conditions of your life. Not to get like two marks, but that's what affects how happy you are, how much joy you're able to have. It's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs thing. It costs money to get you to the point where you can even begin to experience joy and compassion and
Yeah.
companionship with other
Well,
people.
okay, like, okay, what is the first on the Maslow's list of needs? Which I know there's like a bunch of even other stuff behind it, but the first is just safety. So in America, where we live, like, you need food, shelter, clothing, healthcare.
Right.
Or we'll just do food, shelter, healthcare. All of those are not provided in a safety net.
No.
You cannot just like you can't even like to go fucking libertarian. You can't just live off the land. Like that's illegal. You
Right.
can't do that. So you have to have money even to exist because like to me all of those are human rights, like housing, healthcare, food.
Not even just you, to the whole world agreed that they're human rights. And the United States ratified that in the 90s. The United States agreed that those things are human
Yeah, and
rights.
like if you think about our constitution, like I'm just saying like even if you're like, well, I'm into America, like, even if you're into like America as it is, like life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, like to me, all of those are encompassed in housing, healthcare, food, and water. Like,
Yeah.
and none of those are provided for us. We all have to pay for them. So if you lose your job, if you don't have a good credit score, all of those can be fucked. Like, because let's say you don't get a good credit score, you don't have an apartment to live. How are you going to find a job if you don't have an address?
Right.
Like, you can lie and say that it's so like, it's so hard to do anything when you don't have a place to live.
Right.
Like,
And it's so hard to get a place to live. You don't have a good credit score.
yeah. And then if you don't have a place to live, you can't get a job. If you don't have a job, you can't get health care. Like maybe like now you can get like Medi-Cal and stuff, but like, you know, usually your health care is tied to your job.
Also, Medi-Cal is only in California.
Yeah. Well, I think they have something similar in Oregon,
Hmm.
but like not I'm sure like if you're in like especially like a southern state, like
A
it's
conservative state. Yeah.
yeah, it's really like difficult to do. Like and like uh and then like food, it's like yeah, you can get like food stamps or SNAP if you like, but you don't get very much.
Right.
Like
And
I
you have to be
remember
able to navigate the system.
yeah, I was just thinking about like Gwyneth Paltrow like showing like this is how you can live off like food stamps. I mean, she was trying to show like you can't live off the amount of money for food stamps,
Yeah.
but in a way you were just like, what are you doing?
She was like extra bad at it.
Like of course, like extra bad. Like
Yeah.
well
She's
actually
like, oops, I spent it all and
well
fell.
actually she was I this is from like a maintenance phase episode, so I'm gonna
Wait, I think I remember this. It was a trend where celebrities tried to do their grocery shopping off of the average amount of money that
you get from
people in.
SNAP.
Yes, I totally remember this. And all these celebrities were like, I can totally do this. And then they did this like really out of touch grocery
Well,
shopping.
I actually thought that like what the stuff she actually bought, I remember being like, actually, that's not so bad. She got like some eggs, a couple apples, like a loaf of bread, like, some of the stuff I was like, "Yeah, because bread and eggs will last you, like, a long."
Yeah, she
Like,
didn't know the beans and rice and potatoes hack.
I know, and the ramen.
And the ramen and the canned tomato sauce, which you can make into anything.
Yeah, it's like, they don't know
They
they
don't know
don't
the
know the
hacks.
hacks,
Yeah.
like, or, like, peanut butter.
Peanut butter. Peanut butter
Like,
is
when
expensive, but it goes a long way and gives you protein.
and, like, for me, like, I need it or else I get the hypoglycemic.
Right, 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 right.
But, like, but, yeah, it's just, like, anyway, like, it's like, as Gwyneth said, it's not enough.
It's not enough. As Gwyneth Paltrow, goop queen,
But, like, to me, it's just,
delusional
like,
capitalist goop icon,
I
Gwyneth
kind of feel
Paltrow.
like this is not a bug of the system, it's a feature.
Yeah,
It's to keep there is, not to sound conspiratorial, but there is a sect of society who has, like, interest in not sharing their wealth and their money. So, what better way to keep the poor's poor than having to jump through all these wild hoops just to live? So, if you're jumping through all these wild hoops just to live, you'll take fucking any job. So, like, what is it? The dude from Applebee's was like, we need to we can't have these social services. You can't give people money because who's going to fucking work at Applebee's?
right, and they're right, and that's why after COVID, a huge labor rights movement has been forming and picking up
Yeah,
steam, which
because
is phenomenal.
when you have time, you know what you do? You see how fucked up it is. Like, you see how fucked up working a job is.
And
Like,
that's the thing too, like, I think about when I was in high school, just how much more I read, before I was legally able to work at 14, so maybe it was short-lived.
yeah.
But before I had to work a job, I had a lot more free time, and I just read, and I felt, like, so knowledgeable about, like, current affairs and, like, world politics because I had time to be informed, and that's, like, a luxury, and when you're informed, yeah, you really do get the perspective to be like, "This is fucked up,
Yeah,
and
why
other places aren't doing it this
yeah, why
way."
do you think all the protests happened during COVID is because people weren't working.
Right, people could go out and
So
protest
it's
without
just
fear of
like
losing their job.
I, you know, I feel like it's not a conspiracy. It's funny when I talk to people who are really into conspiracy theories and I'm like, the most conspiratorial, all the conspiracy is just banal. It's
Yeah.
that most rich dudes don't care.
They don't care about us.
And it is rich dudes.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
like, and you know what was fun? I saw this TikTok about this article that this guy who's like he's like a tech, like, futurist kind of guy. And he's like, I was talking to these really rich people about, like, what we're going to do for climate change. And he's like, yeah, this is all the stuff you like. No, this guy was like, my plan. He's like, I got this bunker. I hired all these Navy SEALs, but I got to know that they're not going to just turn on me when shit hits the fan. And the guy was like, "Wait, what?" And he's like, "Well, you could try to be like, maybe form some camaraderie with your Navy SEALs and be like, we're on a team." He's like, "No, I think I'm going to get them dog collars that shock them so I can keep them in line."
That is so unhinged. That's his climate
I gotta find this TikTok.
that's his climate change plan.
Like, he's like, yeah, he's like, yeah, they're just like, yeah, we're rich. We're just going to get bunkers and hire Navy SEALs with shock dog collars.
Wow.
And we're going to be the only one with the buttons. And I'm like, this couldn't go. Like, to me, that's why like, same with Elon Musk. It's like, oh, we don't have to worry about the poor people because we have enough power to where we can go to space. We can build a bunker. We can build a fucking walls to keep people out. We can live like fucking kings and serfs. Like, we have a moat around that the poors can't get in.
That's the reason why, though, everything has to come down to getting rid of money. Like, you're never going to have society advance as long as money is around because without money, you can't coerce people into doing that shit.
Yeah, and it's like, even beyond that, I think, money is it's funny because we're always like, that's the place that we're ending up. And I'm kind of like, I think that getting rid of money is the start, because I think that what it is we have to understand what values we value. And most people value camaraderie, friendship, working together, taking care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Even the most fucking conservative person will be like, I take care of my family. I take care of other people.
And they value hard work. And it's like money is it's so counter to every idea of hard work because it's a store of value, which means you don't have to work hard. You just put it in somewhere where it generates more money and you sit back and wait for it to kind of come to fruition.
Someone has said to me like, well, I don't like socialism because I think people won't work hard. And I'm like, well, what about people now who are rich, who like inherited a bunch of money, who just get trust funds and never had to work, and they're rich, but they've never had to work like that.
Right. People already don't work now.
Yeah. And I'm like, the people who work the hardest usually make the least amount of money.
Right.
And so, yeah, to me, it's like not only, I mean, the system is just absurd, but it's like not only a thing of like, we need to just get rid of money as a basis for things that should be human rights. And we have to have a real discussion of values and be like, these are our values, and we don't have money because a value of ours is taking care of other people and living in a society where each of us have our freedom, our autonomy, and our ability to just live.
And money's always been synonymous with oppression because if you think about where money came from, it really started to rise to prevalence so kings could pay armies.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. It was like a tool of wage enslavement, right? And it's like that's where money came from. Money always started as a tool to control and manipulate people on behalf of the king. And we still see that today. It's just our kings are the CEOs of major corporations now, and the revolving door between them and our congressional seats.
And I think once people realize that money is actually like a pretty new concept in human history, and that like there's so many different ways that we can live that we're like, not only is your life good, but everyone's life is good. And selfishly, everyone else's life being good makes your life even better. Like, I think, and then we can get rid of all the just fucking silly things like fucking the stupid, I'm so mad about my credit report going down because I'm paying my bills.
Yes. So I think to sum up our credit score episode, it's abolish credit scores.
Fuck yeah.
Abolish money.
Fuck yeah.
And we got to call someone about Kenna's score going down.
I know. You know what? I found out because a certain company app that I use told me it went down.
Right. And if you're Credit Karma or Kia or Coffee Coke, give us your money because we like you. We'll happily say good things about you, but not Coca-Cola's corporate history because I think that's pretty fun. Just the Coffee Coke in particular, just the singular product endorsement. Is there anything else you want to add?
Maybe we can learn how to make it like people make Four Loko on TikTok.
Oh, I like this. Stay tuned. Madeline and Kenna learn how to make Coffee Coke. Is that it? It's the episode?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. If you would like to join us on our Patreon, which we mentioned in this episode, you can find us at patreon.com/pickmeupimscared. It is $2 a month to join us there. We post 2 bonus episodes per month, and also you can message us show ideas, give us feedback, the whole 9 yards. And if you don't want to give us your $2 a month, I totally get it. I wouldn't want to give me my $2 a month either. We're just happy you're here.